My Marvel superhero girlfriend. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction, so don't try any techniques you hear here in real life. Your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 1, The Reincarnated Person, Nian. A non-holy timeline. Under the inky blue night sky, the neon lights of the modern city shimmered, appearing far more bustling and vibrant than the daytime scene. A golden figure plummeted diagonally from the top floor of a skyscraper, as sharp as lightning, yet straighter than lightning, as slender as a meteor, yet smaller than a meteor. It swept past billboards and giant screens suspended 100 meters in the air, before crashing down harshly onto the rooftop of a 5-star hotel just below. Pain, pain, pain. A jarring hole was shattered in the hard tiles. The figure in the center merely groaned, her body and clothing intact. She slowly rose to her feet, her right hand supporting her silver sword. Facing the cold night wind, tinged with a hint of frost and snow, the dust parted, revealing a pair of dark, luminous eyes. She carried a round shield, a longsword in hand. Nian's face was filled with despair, her mouth twitching slightly as she looked down at her current attire. The top consisted of a compact, tightly fitting set of red gold armor, bearing everything from the neck to the shoulders, with a distinctly bulged chest. The bottom, a dark blue dress, connected to the upper armor, was even more revealing than the most fashionable miniskirt and shorts, creating a distinct space between her and the golden knee pads. Each wrist contained a pair of silver bracelets, and if you add the silver star-studded crown adorning her forehead. This was a sensual outfit that would make even the most elite models blush, making them want to pull the skimpy hem down with their bare hands. It was a look that should have belonged to a superhero like Wonder Woman. And the Nian who wore it was unmistakably male, with a penis. What the hell am I doing? Nian was on the verge of tears. That morning, he had been just an ordinary high school student, believing that anything transcendental and supernatural had nothing to do with him. Unexpectedly, now, he had become the embodiment of the extraordinary. Before Nian could recover, a loud buzzing sound reached his ears, and the air above the city shook 100 meters above the city. A police helicopter approached, sweeping a huge, bright beam of light. The strong wind whipped up by the helicopter's propeller made Nian feel a chill in her crotch, and she instinctively wanted to pull down her skirt. But that was too late. If the helicopter captured this scene, Nian felt like she could move to another city, or even a planet, overnight. Shit. Nian gritted his teeth, raised his ancient longsword again, and simply ignored the terrifying ground. With a sudden force from his toes, his power was poorly controlled, and the hotel roof beneath him was crushed directly. Just before the beam of light fell on him, Nian leaped high again, rushing towards another building dozens of meters away. The cause of this scene had to start half a day ago. 12 hours ago. In downtown Washington, USA, a residential area along Central Avenue. Nian yawned and rose from his bed. From the living room, through the door, he could faintly hear the clear voice of the TV host. It's 7 a.m. in Washington. Today's weather is cloudy with light snow, and the outdoor temperature is between 5 and 3 degrees Celsius. We recommend everyone bring snow jackets and rain gear when going out. Nian stopped the alarm clock that was about to go off and glanced at the time. It was frozen at 7 a.m., December 21st, 2011. Another Christmas was approaching. Time flies, Nian sighed, finding his slippers on the blanket near the bed. He changed into his pre-prepared winter school clothes in the closet and left the room. Pushing open the door, Nian habitually called out to the living room, "Auntie, good morning." His greeting went unanswered. Outside the living room, the cool morning light streamed in through the balcony windows, the curtains drawn. The already monotonous pale floor looked like a piece of floating ice. The television, still on, continued to play the local morning news. Elsewhere, a clean, modern dining table was set with breakfast, the usual simple trio of milk, eggs, and toast. A faint scent of violets lingered in the stagnant, cold air of the living room, but its source was nowhere to be found. Out so early? Nian muttered, dismissing the thought as he turned and headed into the adjacent bathroom. The bathroom wasn't stocked with much, just a face towel, a mouthwash cup, and a toothbrush. The colors and styles were uniform, and they were typically two sets, one large and one small. Naturally, Nian used the smaller size. Despite his repeated requests for the larger size, he'd always been refused, claiming he was underage. As Nian began to wash, the mirror above the sink revealed a young man's face. Black hair and brown eyes, unmistakably Chinese. His delicate features still retained a touch of youth, his skin delicate and fair, a stark reminder of the typical homebody from school. Wearing a white gauze sweatshirt and a long, plain scarf, his overall appearance leaned towards the neutral. Nian's sluggish mouth curled up. There was nothing he could do, this was also the owner's aesthetic. Fortunately, he was tall enough. At 16, still in the growth and development stage, his body had easily surpassed the 5.70-meter barrier. Returning to the living room, Nian began to eat the American breakfast prepared on the table, but his attention was quickly drawn to the morning news on television. Yesterday afternoon, Iron Man was spotted in Iraq, Iran, and other places, inflicting devastating damage to local criminal organizations within half an hour. That same evening, Tony Stark and his secretary, Pepper Potts, arrived at a bar dinner in New York on time, a true master of time management. According to statistics, Gotham City's crime rate has dropped significantly in recent years. Investigators attribute this to Batman's powerful and efficient crackdown on local criminals, as well as the establishment of Arkham Asylum, which can house and process a large number of dangerous criminals. Reporters have noticed small-scale demonstrations in Metropolis recently, with some citizens expressing dissatisfaction with the city's superhero, Superman. The specific reasons remain to be determined. It seems that any report not related to superheroes can't be considered trending news these days. This is the trend of the times. Nian is no stranger to this kind of news, but as he tilts his head back to drink a sip of warm milk, feeling the silky warmth sink into his stomach, he can't help but sigh. Strange world. Yes, Nian is a reincarnated person. The specific reasons for death and reincarnation are no longer important, what matters is the world he's been reborn into. A hypermodern, magical world. This is what Nian learned as a child, browsing geography and history books. For example, World War I on Earth actually involved a true god of war, only to be brought to an end by a legendary goddess. As for World War II, the evil organization Hydra waged war, seeking world domination, before the long war was finally brought to an end by the superhero Captain America. These are just the major events in history. There are countless lesser-known conflicts, where heroes of justice and villains with extraordinary powers clash almost daily on the other side of the world. This world is somewhat similar to the American comic book settings Nian had heard friends mention at the time, but unfortunately, he wasn't interested then and barely understood them, so there's no comparison now. In the current world, technology reigns supreme, magic becomes a deity, mutations reign supreme, and aliens invade. However, none of this matters to Nian. He was now just a perfectly normal, ordinary person, having lived in Washington for 16 years, his daily life untouched by supernatural events. Except for the superpower he suddenly awakened last weekend, on his 16th birthday. As long as there's physical contact with a dependent of the opposite sex, an exchange of fluids at any level, one can master their abilities for a certain period of time. Simple, direct, and brutal. Nian named this superpower, a power he'd only seen in comics in his previous life, Lord of the Familiar. After all, this superpower was practically tailor-made for villains. Its nature was no less impressive than more common abilities like mind-reading and time-limiting. Of course, Nian hadn't considered using it for evil or becoming a superhero. Honestly, he considered it rather useless. Compared to Mr. Stark's Iron Man suit, Mr. Superman's Man of Steel, and Captain America's super soldier physique, he couldn't possibly ask someone to pause before a fight and find a woman to buff him, could he? And if this woman had an ordinary physique, it would only provide a slight boost in combat power. Moreover, for Nian, who had been single in both his previous and next lives, this so-called superpower, it was practically nothing. He quickly lost interest in the news reports about the fashion cover girls gossiping about when Iron Man Tony Stark would sleep this month. Nian's gaze gradually shifted to the side of the TV, where he saw a wooden shelf filled with photos of him, from infancy to his current teenage years. Most of them were personal photos of him, with no mention of his aunt, not even a simple back view. His aunt disliked photos, especially selfies. Nian knew this. It wasn't that his aunt was ugly or photogenic. Nian could confidently say that his aunt was an absolute beauty, on par with, or even surpassing, the actresses and models on TV. Since the day he was picked up by his aunt on Christmas Day in 1995, he remembered her appearance as unchanged with age, a true ageless goddess. No, next time I have to get my aunt to take a picture with me. I'll be more assertive, maybe acting cute will work. Just as Nian was making up his mind, the doorbell rang. Who is it? Nian frowned. In his memory, his aunt had never forgotten her keys. Just as Nian walked from the living room to the door, before he could even peer through the peephole, a photo slipped through the crack under the door. Seeing the photo, Nian froze, and all his movements stopped. The photo was a rare black and white background. From the pixels to the natural yellowing, it was a product of the last century. The urban wasteland background, reminiscent of a World War I battlefield, confirmed this. What shocked Nian was that in this strange, old-fashioned photo, surrounded by officers and soldiers, a figure resembling his aunt appeared. Reading note: those who have not seen Marvel or DC movies will not be affected by this book. This book contains a lot of twisted content, so please buckle up. Chapter 2, Childhood Gwen. It was a winter morning. Feather-sized snowflakes fell from the sky, landing in every corner of the metropolis. Even at dawn, Washington, a world-class city, was already brimming with the vibrant energy it deserves. Students and office workers alike bustled through the freshly cleared streets. A beep. A local police car slowly drove to a stop on the side of the road in the residential complex. The door opened, and a lovely blonde girl, backpack in hand, jumped out from the back seat. Gwen, slow down. Your water bottle. Officer George, dressed in his formal uniform, opened the door and chased after her. He held the thermos in his hand and, looking at his beloved daughter, his tone almost doting. Don't you really need me to take you to school? The roads are slippery and it's snowing. Gwen took the water bottle and put it in her bag, refusing sharply. No, I have my rain gear and non-slip boots. But, Officer George began to say. At that moment, Gwen's eyes suddenly lit up, her cheeks flushed with joy and excitement. She jumped up and down like a rabbit, waving her arms excitedly toward a certain spot. Nian, here. Here. I knew it, Officer George sighed inwardly, turning back to see a familiar young man appear around the corner. Hearing the voice calling him, Nian glanced up at the two men and immediately nodded and greeted them with a smile. Gwen, Uncle George, good morning. What a coincidence to see you again. They were familiar to Nian. Gwen, whose full name was Gwen Stacy, was a girl of the same age who lived in the nearby neighborhood. As children, Nian and Gwen had attended the same daycare center, elementary school, middle school, and now high school, making them close childhood sweethearts. Her father, George Stacy, was a well-known and influential local police officer who happened to oversee security in their area of the city. Yes, what a coincidence, Gwen's eyes curved, a smile filling her lips. The snow around was white and shimmering, but Officer George's face seemed a bit dark. Was this a coincidence? No way. He'd clearly timed it specifically for this boy, running into him here by chance. Of course. Officer George couldn't even defend his daughter's little feelings, so how could he possibly expose them right then and there? Besides, he'd already researched Nian's family background 10 years ago. He was truly a pitiful and kind child. Ah. Nian, why aren't you wearing a hat or holding an umbrella? Gwen exclaimed in surprise, swooping in close. Before he could reply, she was already brushing the snow and frost from his hair and brows. I was in a hurry to get out, so I forgot. Nian smiled nonchalantly, temporarily putting his chaotic thoughts aside. Remember to keep warm, though. What if you catch a cold? Gwen puffed her cheeks a bit angrily, which only added a touch of playfulness and cuteness to her expression. Without giving it any thought, she placed her furry hat on Nian's head, blowing warm air from her hands onto his slightly chilled face. To others, this would have been considered a very intimate act, but for the two who had grown up together, it was so commonplace that it held no special meaning. It's cold outside. I'll take you to school, Officer George said, unable to bear it any longer. Gwen didn't respond, but instead looked up at Nian. School isn't far. I'd rather. Nian was about to refuse, but feeling Officer George's sharp gaze, he nodded and agreed. Thank you, Uncle George. Gwen smiled and said, then please give us a ride, Dad. You're welcome. Officer George held his head high, clearly prepared to become a tool for his daughter. Moments later, the police car pulled onto the main road, heading towards the high school. Inside the heated car, Gwen and Nian sat together in the back seat. After climbing in, Nian stared out the window at the rapidly passing winter streets, his face and eyes occasionally vacillating with a dazed expression. A gentle, soft hand suddenly grasped his hand. Nian turned to see the young woman's face, a look of worry. Gwen asked, "Nian, how are you today? Are you feeling unwell? Why do you look so worried?" Nian said, unsure of how to begin. What had been weighing on his mind since he left was, of course, the photo that had been slipped into the house. Although he later opened the door to check, the mysterious person who had slipped the photo was long gone, leaving behind a host of strange mysteries. Was that photo really taken during World War I? Who was the woman in the photo, wearing armor identical to his aunt's? His aunt's mother? No, it was almost a century ago. According to seniority, she could have been his grandmother's mother. If he asked Gwen's father for help, he should be able to find the person who slipped the photo in. Nian hesitated, then said, "I'm fine. I'm just a little cold." "Then you'll be fine." Gwen changed her arms and wrapped her arms around Nian's left arm. From this distance, they could clearly feel each other's body warmth. Officer George, driving, glanced in the rearview mirror and nearly exploded. Seeing his own tender, white cabbage offer too big, even one so beautiful and handsome that he'd raised under his care, was something no father could tolerate. Wait. As a man of experience, Officer George's thoughts flickered as he looked through the rearview mirror at the young man and girl. Anyone with a discerning eye could see his daughter's affection, but this boy didn't seem to have those feelings. Well, as a father, this was even more painful. The police car stopped in front of the middle school. When Gwen and Nian got out, they immediately caught the attention of many students. It wasn't until then that Nian took notice. Gwen was wearing a new beige down jacket, layered over a snug-fitting handmade sweater. Her long legs were snugly clad in white jeans, accentuated by a pair of black thigh-high boots. The 16-year-old girl's figure radiated youthful energy, coupled with her radiant, short blonde hair and delicate, petite face. To others, she was simply amazing. Having played together since childhood, Nian was accustomed to this. Seeing the other students' envious, jealous reactions, he suddenly realized that Gwen seemed quite popular in school. "Gwen, you'd better let go of my hand," Nian said. "No, it's warmer this way." Gwen grumbled, tightening her grip until Nian's right arm was completely engulfed in warmth. Compared to the ultimate softness of a marshmallow, there was also an indescribable suppleness. Nian himself, of course, had no such thoughts. The students nearby, however, were furious, their eyes reddening, their inner voices screaming, "Damn it! Let me go, Al! You dared to threaten a knife-wielding thug with your bare hands in elementary school? Are you afraid?" Gwen laughed, her hand covering her mouth. Finally, she released Nian's arm, her face reddening in realization. "Don't always bring up my dark past." Nian's lips twitched. Back then, a bit immature, he had recently watched a documentary about Captain America and had always believed he had the potential to be a superhero. Had the police not arrived in time, he would have been reincarnated for the third time. After 16 years as an ordinary person, Nian, a reincarnated person without any system cheats, had completely let go. How could there be so many gifted superheroes? With a global population of 5 or 6 billion, only a handful of true superheroes have emerged: Captain America, Iron Man, Batman, and Superman. And Superman, of course, is an alien, Kryptonian. It's not that I'm afraid of trouble. Nian ignored the angry students and walked into the relatively warm hallway of the teaching building. He looked at the girl beside him and said jokingly, "Of course I don't mind. I just think, this isn't good for you. Isn't your popularity high? I heard you're almost running for #1 here." "Where did you hear that?" Gwen couldn't help but spat. But, at that moment, Gwen suddenly realized that childhood sweethearts weren't always a good thing. Sometimes, once a relationship has been established for a long time, it's difficult to suddenly change it. Just as Nian and Gwen were walking down the hallway of the teaching building, a girl wearing glasses in a corner seat in the last row of a 10th grade classroom looked out, a little lost in thought, her eyes subtly following Nian's movements as he walked back down the hallway. "Kara, what are you looking at?" a female classmate asked curiously, approaching the table. "Nothing," Kara Danvers quickly averted her gaze. Really? The female student was skeptical. She followed Kara's gaze, but all she could see was a clean white wall. The thick wall blocked the outdoor corridor, so she couldn't see anything passing by. Chapter 3 Touching the Extraordinary. Unable to concentrate on his classes all day, Nian hurried home as soon as school was over. But upon reaching his doorstep, he suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. Could something that had remained unchanged for over a decade change because of that old photograph? This thought inexplicably crossed Nian's mind, causing his heart to suddenly tighten. He stood there, staring at the closed, silent door. For about 10 seconds. The cold winter air continued to pour in from the stairs outside, and Nian's palms were sweating as he gripped the key. Just as he made up his mind to open the door, it suddenly clicked open from the inside. Standing at the doorway was a woman who, no matter how critical one looked at her, was flawless. She looked only about 28, her black hair combed and tied up, giving her an intellectual air. Her face, delicately painted with light makeup, was flawless. Her eyes were like the silhouette of the azure sky, and her dark eyebrows, with a hint of heroism, spread slightly above them. The woman wore a loose, stylish, long white shirt and trousers, showcasing her graceful, tall figure. What truly captivated him was her queenly elegance, yet a touch of naturalness and ease mingled with it. Regal and casual. These two distinct qualities, far from clashing, blended delicately and perfectly. Nian instinctively called out to the woman before him, "Auntie, come in." Diana Prince didn't question Nian's reason for standing outside the doorway. Instead, she crouched slightly, her neck and hips forming a perfect arc. She retrieved her slippers from the shoe cabinet by the door and placed them on the carpet in front of Nian. "Auntie, Nian opened his mouth, feeling he shouldn't hide anything from the woman in front of him. This had been the same for 16 years, but he was at a loss for words. "Let's have dinner first," Diana interrupted, as if sensing something, and walked into the living room. Nian suddenly felt relaxed. He placed his school bag on a hook by the door, changed into slippers, and entered the living room. Warm lights illuminated the living room. 2 plates of pasta steamed on the table, accompanied by beef sauce, chili oil, and boiled water. Diana and Nian, one older and one younger, sat down, facing each other, each silently finishing their dinner. "Pasta again," Nian muttered softly, as he gazed at the familiar meal, seemingly oblivious to the previous heavy atmosphere. Unexpectedly, his aunt, Diana, across from him, replied with a stern face, "It's good enough to have something to eat. How dare you be so demanding?" "Yes," Nian grimaced, quickly picking up his fork and finishing his portion of the colorful pasta. His aunt was perfect from the outside, except for her lack of culinary talent, so the food tasted just as ordinary as ever. However, eating it now reminded Nian of his childhood. Back then, his aunt couldn't cook at all. Ahem. Nian choked while eating too quickly. Diana, who was sitting in front of him and seemed to have been keeping an eye on him, immediately stood up, came over, and gently patted his back. "Eat slowly," she said, casually offering him her cup of water. Nian took a deep gulp of the warm water, and his chest immediately felt much better. So, he simply spoke in one breath, "Auntie, someone sent a photo home this morning." He placed a photo from his pocket on the table and recounted his experience at home that morning. Diana wasn't surprised, but listened quietly to his story. However, a slight ripple flashed in her eyes when she saw the black and white photo. After Nian finished explaining the whole process, Diana put the photos away, returned to her seat, and gently instructed, "I know who slipped the photos in. I will handle this matter. You don't have to worry about this problem in the future. Okay." Nian had no doubt that his aunt could handle everything. He just asked with pure worry and curiosity, "And the person wearing strange armor in the photo? Since you want to know, then I'll tell you." Diana's cold face was solemn. After a moment of thinking, she said seriously, "Yes, she is actually my grandmother. She passed away a long time ago. I heard that she helped the army fight against mysterious forces during World War I. Mysterious forces? Could it be the legendary gods?" Nian opened his eyes wide in surprise. The most widely circulated cause of World War I was the god of war. Diana shook her head and said, "What happened in the past is too long ago. I only heard my mother mention it when I was a child." She paused. "However, there are no gods in this world." "That's right." Nian secretly breathed a sigh of relief. At most, aliens have appeared now, which is still within the scope of science. Diana breathed a sigh of relief. I've got a friend over, and I'll be out for a bit. I might be back later, she whispered, taking a sip from her water cup. She noticed Nian staring intently at hers. What's wrong? Diana asked curiously, setting the cup down. Nothing, nothing. Nian shook his head. A question suddenly occurred to him. He'd just used his aunt's water cup, and now she'd used it again. Wasn't that an indirect kiss? Indirect kissing with his aunt wasn't a big deal. When they were little, Nian and his aunt often bathed together. This was also the main reason why girls still found it so difficult to attract Nian's attention. It's like being mesmerized by a masterpiece every day. Looking at other works always feels a bit dull. But now, a question arose. Would an indirect kiss trigger the family master? Nian couldn't help but wonder. He hadn't yet used his superpowers, but he knew the 3 prerequisites for activating the family master. It required someone of the opposite sex, physical contact, and an exchange of liquid media. Nian's aunt was naturally of the opposite sex, and a perfectly beautiful one at that. As for intimate contact, I wonder if that back pat just now counts? The most important thing is the exchange of fluids. Even if there was any, it was neutralized by the water in the cup. So, should it be okay? Nian pondered this question absent-mindedly until the light dinner was over. Don't wait for me. Go home and get some sleep, Diana said in a soothing tone, leaving Nian feeling a bit amused. He replied, I know. Be careful out there. Our city doesn't have any resident superheroes. Currently, only New York City, Gotham City, and Metropolis, the 3 major economic capitals, have Iron Man, Batman, and Superman resident there, respectively, and that's because they live there. Don't worry, I've always been lucky. As for you, stay home and don't run around. Diana winked, giving him a reassuring smile, then changed into her winter high-heeled boots and left the house. Silence fell once again in the house. Nian stared at the closed door, his heart strangely empty as he began to think back to the conversation. Is the photo thing really over? Nian muttered. If the photo truly represented my aunt's grandmother, then what was the intention behind the person who had placed it in the house? This doesn't seem to be that simple. Nian was dazed as he cleared his dishes when he heard the crisp sound of something cracking. Startled, Nian looked down, his pupils suddenly constricting. The water cup he was holding shattered, as if subjected to a force beyond its capacity, shards of glass tinkling and scattering across the floor. This cup? No, it's my body. Nian's palm remained unscathed. Instead, he felt a surge of strength he had never felt before, a feeling that it could crush and destroy anything. Was it an illusion, or was it a delusion? Stunned, Nian glanced at the metal knife and fork in his other hand. His fingers moved slightly, and the metal fork visibly bent and deformed. On the handle of the metal knife and fork, there was a clearly visible fingerprint indentation. Every gesture showed his extraordinary ability. Huh? Nian was completely stunned. Chapter 4, The Magic Man's First Appearance. Diana walked downstairs, turned a few corners, and soon arrived at a retro-style coffee shop not far from her home. Since it was dinner time, the cafe was not crowded, and Diana immediately spotted her appointment. Secluded in a corner by the window, a middle-aged woman in her early 40s, wearing sunglasses and slightly curly hair, sat. Mom, what would you like? The tall and stylish Diana immediately became the center of attention. Even the younger female waiter's eyes lit up. She politely approached with her order. A hot coffee will be fine, Diana replied with a smile, taking a seat across from the woman in sunglasses. Diana Prince, long time no see. The middle-aged woman removed her sunglasses, her eyes colder than winter. Diana nodded slightly. It's been a while, Barbara Minerva. Seeing her former colleague, friend, and enemy again brought mixed feelings. More than 20 years have passed, and you're still exactly the same as you were back then, without aging. You're worthy of being a descendant of God, right? Barbara chuckled, gazing at Diana's perfect and familiar face, and said self-deprecatingly, ever since I lost my cheetah powers and reached a certain age, I've inevitably gained crow's feet on my face. My body is getting thinner and thinner, and my skin isn't as tough and elastic as it used to be. You still can't let go of what happened back then. Diana frowned slightly and asked bluntly, so, is this why you secretly stuffed my old photos into my house? Barbara leaned back and couldn't help laughing, You don't even bother reminiscing about the past, but you're getting down to business so quickly? It seems you care about that child." Diana remained silent and said seriously, "He's just an ordinary person. So, that's why I stuffed the photos." Barbara's expression added a hint of sarcasm. "You're a goddess who's high above, flying into the sky and into the earth, and immortal. And all these years, you actually adopted an ordinary human child? What are you doing? Do you want to completely integrate into our human world? Stop kidding." At the end, she slammed her hands on the table and stood up, her emotions agitated. She looked at Diana with immense resentment and anger. Diana remained composed, her long legs leaning against each other. Even as she sat quietly in her chair, her aura remained unshaken by Barbara. She was silent for a moment, then whispered, "I was completely disappointed with humanity and had no hope." "What are you talking about?" Barbara's face was filled with confusion, but she eventually sat down again. Diana glanced out the window at the snow-covered streets and continued, "Until 16 years ago, on Christmas Eve. What happened to me?" Nian stared at his hands in disbelief. He tried to stab his arm with a metal knife and fork, but the skin was so tough that he felt only a hint of pain when he applied force, but then the sharp tip of the knife and fork gave way before the skin did. He suddenly remembered that his aunt had never been injured in over a decade. No way. As if everything suddenly dawned on Nian, he looked up, his gaze naturally focused on the ceiling of his living room. But for years, the ceiling, which had always seemed simple and empty, now, prominently displayed in its center, was a silver sword that shouldn't have existed, a dark gold round shield, and a set of women's armor shrouded in a wild aura. These mysterious objects, which shouldn't have existed, were all connected by a golden rope that appeared and disappeared, with a strange and ornate headdress, silver bracelets, and golden knee pads attached to each end. "It's not that they didn't exist," Nian muttered. "Perhaps they've always existed, he just couldn't see them before, but now he can." Nian instinctively reached up, and just as his fingertips touched the golden rope hanging in midair, the rope suddenly turned from solid to virtual, until it completely vanished. Nian suddenly realized something was wrong. The sword, shield, and armor, which had been suspended by the rope, were now in free fall as the golden rope melted and disappeared. Nian was a bit stunned, but his reflexes and speed were already extraordinary. He immediately reached out to take them, his movements almost a shadow. What caught him even more by surprise and infuriating him was that, just as his hands had grasped the crown and silver bracelet, they melted into his body, fastening to his forehead and wrist respectively. Nian's mind went blank. He stared at the women's battle armor he had already caught, and could already foresee what was about to happen next. This kind of thing, no. No matter how much Nian resisted it, the next moment, Nian inevitably changed into the battle armor's top and skirt. His original clothes disappeared, revealing his arms and thighs, which were not covered by the armor. Wearing this outfit in winter would have been unbearably cold, but perhaps due to his current physique, Nian didn't feel the cold at all. Instead, donning this primitive and wild battle armor, his blood boiled like magma, and he felt the urge to shout, to draw his sword and fight. Boom, boom, boom. Nian faintly heard the sound of drums, as if from a distant, ancient past, and his blood boiled. Who was beating the drums? No, Nian suddenly realized. There was no drumming, it was clearly the powerful beating of his own heart. "It's so hot." Nian couldn't help but cry out. Clad in the unique Amazonian armor, his bloodline abilities began to fully awaken. He felt an indescribable power, perhaps energy, flowing beneath his surface, almost tangible. Of course, Nian didn't know at this moment that he now possessed the power of a demigod. With a swish, the overwhelming divine power within him, uncontrollable and with no outlet, finally surged upwards. In the living room, Nian could be seen gritting his teeth, shield slung over his back, sword in hand. A destructive white light streamed down his jet black hair. Just a few strands of white light, emanating from the air, shattered the nearby lampshade into dust. Divine power, nearly condensed into materialized energy, drove his short hair to grow at an alarming rate, turning from black to white, cascading wildly across his lower back, shoulders, and face. His long silver hair was completely stunned, and he quickly reached for the hem of his skirt. He breathed a sigh of relief, thankfully still possessing his sexual characteristics. But his dire situation wasn't resolved, it spiraled out of control. An ordinary person suddenly possessed the power of a demigod. It was like a child suddenly holding the button to launch a missile or nuclear weapon. The first experience of the extraordinary was a constant tendency to collapse. I can't stay here any longer. If this goes on, I'll destroy everything here. Realizing this, Nian raised his foot, attempting to move, but his strength was no longer what it once was. It was like he'd previously been pedaling a bicycle, now using the pedals of a top-tier sports car. Without realizing it, he vanished into a shadow, hurtling forward. In an instant. In the living room, everything in Nian's path, tables, chairs, lamp holders, everything, was smashed to pieces. He continued to move forward, transforming into a stream of light and slamming headfirst into the balcony window. Bang! The glass shattered. Without a second thought, Nian was sent hurtling out of his 16-story home. Chapter 5 Spider-Man Online. It was already nightfall, and in a room in the neighboring complex, less than 500 meters from Nian's home, Gwen, after dinner, a shower, and a change into her long pajamas, lay sprawled on her bed. Like an ostrich, she buried her head between her stuffed toys, her youthful, radiant body motionless. However, her feet, rhythmically tapping against the duvet, betrayed her hidden worries. Gwen, Officer George, still in uniform, approached, gently knocked on the closed door, and asked through the doorway, "Would you like a cup of hot cocoa?" "No, I'd make you fat." Inside, Gwen remained motionless, sprawled on the bed, her voice faint. Officer George said, a hint of doubt in his voice, "Who said when we were little that we wanted to live in a castle made of chocolate and cake and be a princess?" "Dad, don't keep bringing up my past." Gwen cried, a little embarrassed, especially when she paused mid-sentence. Officer George sighed and continued, "Especially at your school. And when that guy was around, right?" "No way." He already knew anyway. Gwen's tone deepened as she spoke, and the stuffed dolls pressing against her head began to tremble slightly. "Gwen," Officer George took a deep breath, as if making the most important decision of his life at that moment. He spoke firmly and solemnly, "If you truly like that boy, Nian, then go ahead and express your feelings. Your father, will definitely support you." Inside the room, the dolls pressing against the girl's head stopped trembling. After 3 seconds of silence, they were all lifted off the bed. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Gwen leaped up from the bed, sitting on the covers like a duck, her hands squeezing the pillows. Her face, whether from being buried for too long or from being poked at her heartstrings, flushed intensely, leaving no doubt that steam would burst forth in an instant. Sweat beads formed, and a few strands of golden hair stained the girl's cheeks. "I'm not in love with Nian." Gwen was filled with shame and indignation. As a young woman, she instinctively wanted to retort, but the pause between them made a rebuttal sound as weak as a blank sheet of paper. Okay, I was just saying if." Officer George, who had been standing outside the door, understood. He was about to say something when the pager on his sleeve suddenly beeped. Officer George immediately answered, "This is Chief George. What's going on?" Knowing that something was wrong, Gwen in the room quickly quieted down. Officer George's already serious expression deepened as he listened to the report from the officer on the pager. "Are you saying that a woman in strange clothes suddenly appeared out of nowhere and robbed the armored car?" "I see. She's not far from where I am. I'll be there right away." Officer George put the pager down and hurriedly called through the door, "Gwen, I have to go out for something. Stay home." "Okay. Dad, stay safe," Gwen replied. "I will." Officer George nodded, then hurriedly left the house. Inside the room, the heat on Gwen's face cooled slightly. Thinking about her father's words, she couldn't help but mutter, "A woman who fell from the sky. Could she be a mutant or a superpowered being?" Gwen's brow furrowed slightly, her concern for her father's safety growing. In this world, people with abilities beyond ordinary human capabilities are rare, but they certainly exist. Because she is one of them. Gwen quickly went to her closet, pushed all her clothes aside, and opened a compartment at the back, revealing what she had hidden behind it, a strange, tight-fitting black and white uniform. The uniform was white from the neck to the chest, with the opposite color black covering the abdomen, hips, and legs. Besides the white hood that covered the head, the uniform also came with a hood with a spiderweb-like black and red pattern on the inside. Besides the bizarre Spider-Woman uniform and hood, a pair of green, low-top, custom-made shoes lay hidden within the compartment. Gwen didn't think twice before removing the hood, uniform, and shoes. She also pulled 3 ordinary band-aids from the lowest drawer of her wardrobe and gently bit them open. Soon, as her pajamas, including the clothing underneath, fell to the floor, Gwen donned the complete Spider-Woman uniform. After changing into the Spider-Woman costume, Gwen gently placed her palms on the floor and crouched down, like a predator, moving silently like a crawling spider. Tuning the radio on her desk to a music channel, Gwen, pretending to be absorbed in her homework, opened her window. Glancing back at the closed door, she grasped the window sill with a slight push, and nimbly and deftly, she leaned out. You see, while Gwen's house wasn't as high as Nian's, it was still a 10-story building, nearly 30 meters high. Gwen's perspective was reversed, and the night-shrouded city below was reflected in reverse. She leaping 10 meters into the air. Just as she was about to fall, she flipped her wrist, and a faint white silk thread shot out, accurately catching the eaves of the neighboring high-rise building. Gwen's hand pulled the resilient silk beneath her, and her petite body adjusted its angle again, launching herself into the air. Following the sirens of the police cars below, she rushed across the street. At that moment, at the intersection across the street, the parked cars collectively sounded their automatic alarms, and many passers-by screamed, "Someone's robbing!" and fled. A cash transport truck was parked in front of the central bank. However, the armored car's supposedly bulletproof roof had been dented by the force of a blow. A woman, clad in bizarre armor and clutching a vintage longsword, lay atop the now-destroyed vehicle. Numerous green US dollars were flung from the shattered cabin, revealing the sheer force of the impact. Yes, this so-called strange woman was none other than our classmate Nian. It was no wonder others misjudged her gender. The skirt-like armor she wore was clearly female, and her long, silver hair cascading over her shoulders only confirmed her apparent gender. My God! Who are you? 2 fully armed SWAT officers stood near the vehicle. They were stunned for a moment, then, with their fortitude, drew their guns and shouted. However, their trembling feet clearly indicated they were terrified. If I say that I accidentally fell here from my home on the 16th floor, would you believe it? Although Nian wanted to answer like this, if he opened his mouth, it would definitely expose the fact that he was a pervert, a boy. The main thing is that no explanation would make sense now. After all, for a normal person to fall from the 16th floor, it would be outrageous for his body to be intact, let alone safe and sound. So, he lay on the armored car and thought for less than half a second. Nian ignored the SWAT police who were pointing guns at him, but turned over at an extremely fast speed, jumped off the roof and ran away from the scene along the road. His speed was so fast that his movements left after images. By the time the SWAT police reacted, he had already run 10 meters away. Chapter 6: The Long Road Home. Hold on, don't even think about running. I'm going to shoot. Completely unprepared for Nian's swift and decisive flight, the 2 SWAT officers were stunned. In a moment of desperation, one of them, unconcerned about whether they were in a busy area, aimed his gun at Nian's back and pulled the trigger. Bang! The sound of gunfire sent screams from passers-by. Huh? Nian turned back as he ran. He could clearly see the bullets coming at him, even the swirl of the bullet's tip. Despite living in America, where gunfights are commonplace, this was his first time witnessing a real bullet, and he hadn't expected it to be aimed at him. Any normal person would be terrified by the mere sight of a gun. After all, even the weakest modern pistol can be fatal if it hits a vital point. But Nian didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. To him, the bullets were simply too slow. It was so slow that Nian felt he could leave the bullet far behind him if he continued to accelerate, and so, naturally, he made a slight sideways evasive motion, the pursuing bullet piercing his tangled silver hair. Oh no! Nian had just dodged the bullet when, out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of a car parked and waiting at the intersection directly ahead. With a fleeting moment of hesitation, Nian thrust out his free left hand and snatched the bullet that had passed him by. What did he do? How is it possible? The SWAT officers who witnessed this cried out in fear. A slight pain and burning sensation spread through their palms. Nian glanced back at the SWAT officers, tossed the bullet, which he had crushed into a metal button, to the ground, and turned back to leave. This time, the 2 SWAT officers remained silent. They held their guns, standing firm like wooden stakes. It was like opening a Pandora's box. Tonight's encounter wasn't the end. It was the beginning. As Nian turned at an intersection, he spotted 3 police cars barreling down the highway ahead, clearly headed for him. Furthermore, the shrill wailing of sirens could be heard faintly from the roads to either side. I just wanted to get home. Is that wrong? And how could it be so efficient? Xinian's mouth twitched. In movies and TV shows, after robberies or crimes, didn't the police always wait until everything was over before rushing to clean up the mess? Why was it so fast when it happened to him? It didn't make sense. Whatever. Anyway, I can't stay out here on the busy streets any longer. Not wanting to accidentally injure anyone, Xinian scanned the surrounding buildings and quickly settled on a relatively low, 4-story convenience store. He accelerated forward, pushing hard on his toes, attempting to leap onto the roof. But this time, he was pushing too hard. His body suddenly weakened, and he only leaped about 6 meters, falling to the ground before even reaching the building. Below, a fleet of police vehicles raced in from various intersections. Damn, don't play with me. Xinian danced in midair, feeling the familiar sensation of falling as he watched the rooftops recede. Just then, with a whoosh, from Xinian's carelessly waving left hand, a golden rope materialized from thin air, spreading and swaying like a dragon over the city. One end of the golden rope was firmly grasped by Xinian, while the other, like a lasso, stretched forward until it attached itself to a lightning rod on the building ahead. Without time to investigate the rope's appearance, Xinian tugged with his left hand, and his body, suspended in midair, leaped back up, soaring onto the 4th-story rooftop of the intersection. That was a close call. Xinian, still in shock, retracted the golden rope, his gaze withdrawing from the empty police car. Using the nearby high-rise building as a stepping stone, he sped away from the scene. On the road below, 5 or 6 police cars screeched to a halt, stopping where Xinian had jumped. Who the hell is that? An officer stepped out of the driver's seat of a police car, muttering to himself in astonishment as he looked at the footprints on the road. It's definitely not an ordinary person, another officer who had just gotten out chimed in. Nonsense. Many officers were speechless. Catching a bullet with bare hands, speeding over 100 miles per hour, and leaping 4 stories high, even for an ordinary person, that's outrageous. What should we do next? Just as the officers felt their hands were tied, a police car, sirens blaring, finally arrived, joining the others on the road. The door opened, and Officer George quickly stepped out. Looking at the other officers, he quickly asked, "Where did the target criminal go?" "Officer, they flew." "No, they jumped." The officers at the scene saluted and pointed to the 10-meter-tall building. It took Officer George 5 seconds to grasp what he meant by jumped away. After a brief moment of thought, Officer George said in a deep voice, "Immediately request helicopter support from the local police force. Such a dangerous unknown individual cannot be allowed to run amok in this city." "Yes, officer." Xinian moved swiftly across the towering skyscrapers. Although he still couldn't control his extraordinary physical strength, he had finally gained some familiarity with the movements outside. So this is what it feels like to fly. Aided by the golden rope in his hand, Xinian leaped back and forth from the top floors of buildings ranging from several to dozens of stories high. When his strength became excessive or weakened, he would use the rope to pull himself to another building to prevent himself from falling off the roof. The golden rope, made of an unknown material, was flexible and could be wrapped around anything: railings, eaves, clothes hanging out to dry. He was shocked to discover that even a tangible object, a mere wisp of black smoke rising from a chimney, could be latched onto by the golden rope as if it were a solid object and leveraged. Xinian even suspected it could be used to lasso clouds, or even something deeper than the so-called soul. Of course, that presupposes the concept of souls exists in this world. Should I be free of them? Xinian reached the top of a skyscraper, perched near the nearly suspended railing, looking down at the tiny black dots of traffic and pedestrians below, and still felt a deep palpitation. Time to go home. With this thought, Xinian leaped once more, mid-air, attempting to throw the golden lasso to close the distance between him and the building opposite. But only as his left hand was about to launch the toss did he notice that the golden rope, which had intervened in time to save him, had vanished without a trace. No way, are you kidding me? Xinian's heart skipped a beat. For the 3rd time that night, he felt a long, drawn-out feeling of falling. Newton was ecstatic. And then, the scene we saw at the beginning unfolded. Xinian plummeted onto the roof of a 5-star hotel. Seeing the police helicopter in pursuit, he could only continue his flight, relying on his unstable strength. 10 minutes later. Even Nian himself didn't know how long he had been flying over the tall building. He only knew that he was getting farther and farther away from the urban area near his home. He once again hid in the shadow of a water tower on a tall building, watching the helicopter patrolling in the wrong direction and flying away until it completely disappeared from his sight. Nian finally exhaled, the heat from his body enough to evaporate the frost and snow, his eyes filled with fatigue. "Now, can I finally go home?" he murmured softly. It was like setting a flag. As soon as Nian finished speaking, a figure appeared from nowhere, beautifully and lightly landing on the top of the tall building's water tower. Chapter 7, Battle of Marineford. As Christmas approached in a western city, the cold grew increasingly intense after nightfall. Especially on the top floor of a 20-story skyscraper, the wind blew fiercely enough to knock an adult off his feet, the whistling night air carrying cotton like frost and snow. The door to the top floor had long been locked from the inside, and no one would come up on weekdays, let alone at night, even at midday. But now, on the top floor, one person crouched low on the highest point of the water tower, while another leaned against the rooftop railing, facing each other across the darkness, about 10 meters away. "Who are you?" Gwen's eyes widened, her scrutinizing gaze resting on the woman through her spider hood. The sight was breathtaking. The woman before her didn't appear to be a formidable figure. Her skin, exposed beneath her armor, was delicate and fair, with no visible muscle mass. It was hard to imagine where her exaggerated strength came from. The armor, weapons, crown, and boots she wore all exuded an ancient wildness and nobility. She stood on the rooftop, a floor covered in a thin layer of snow, braving the chill of the night air. The moon's bright silver light shone down, illuminating her wildly dancing silver hair, making her entire body seem shrouded in a silvery, holy light. Like a deity from the distant pages of ancient Greek civilization. "So beautiful," Gwen couldn't help but exclaim. Though her body was slightly tilted, her hair was dancing, and the darkness and frost prevented her from making out her features, she couldn't see them clearly. Still, so beautiful. The compliment came from the heart, and Gwen couldn't find any other words to describe her. As Gwen studied Nian, Nian stared back. Though her body was tightly wrapped in a tight-fitting uniform, unlike a fake like herself, her figure, attire, and even her movements clearly indicated a real woman. After all, compared to the women's skirt-like armor he was currently wearing, this tight-fitting uniform made it even harder to conceal his gender. No matter how tightly he wrapped himself, a man's crotch would bulge slightly in a tight uniform, unlike the smooth, unobstructed figure of the woman before him. What caught Nian's eye was the black and white spider uniform the mysterious woman wore, perfectly showcasing her slender and petite figure. Like a beast stalking its prey, the spider uniform displayed the curves of a streamlined force, its bulging muscles and tendons perfectly balanced. Any more would be too strong, any less would be less than formidable. Nian froze at the question. It was a cold, crisp, girlish voice. He couldn't remember where he'd heard it before, but it felt strangely familiar. Strange yet familiar. What was this intense feeling of dissonance? Then, hearing the woman's compliment of beautiful completely shut down Nian, he felt a strong urge to jump from the tall building. "Who are you? Don't you want to answer my questions?" Gwen asked, leaning down slightly at Nian, her hands resting on the water tower. Nian remained silent. "I can sense that weapon in your hand is dangerous. If you had really used it, those police officers, even the helicopter, wouldn't have been able to stop you. Why did you just run?" Beneath the spider hood, the girl's face grew increasingly curious. Nian remained silent, glancing down at the antique longsword in his hand. Even during his escape, he hadn't let go of the hilt. This was something my aunt had hidden away at home. For that reason alone, he couldn't possibly have lost it. As for why he didn't use it, why not? He didn't know how to use a sword. And there was another point. Gwen seemed to read his thoughts and judged, "You don't want to hurt those police officers or ordinary people." Nian nodded. Suddenly, he realized why he hadn't spoken. He placed the tip of the antique longsword on the rooftop floor and slashed forward. The antique longsword, forged from some unknown material, sliced through the floor like tofu, leaving a noticeable horizontal line. Gwen looked at the scratch between her and Nian and quickly understood his meaning. "Don't cross the line." Nian nodded gently and held his sword before him, demonstrating his resolve to strike if he continued probing. He didn't want to confront someone suspected of possessing similar supernatural powers, hoping to intimidate him and force him to retreat. "Okay. Gwen agreed surprisingly readily. Just as Nian relaxed, a sly glint flashed in her eyes, and she quickly flipped her wrists forward. Whoosh! 2 strands of white silk shot out from Gwen's wrists. One clung to the ancient sword in Nian's hand, while the other latched onto the railing behind him, encircling Nian from left and right. "Let me see your true face." Gwen grabbed hold of both threads and yanked. She couldn't wrench the sword out of Nian's hand, but using the silk's incredible elasticity, she suddenly launched herself like a human cannonball, hurtling towards Nian's arms at breakneck speed. Social death, in a flash. Realizing this, Nian's fighting instincts were awakened. A flash of inspiration struck him, and instead of grasping the longsword, he flung it forward with all his might. Swish! The longsword pierced the air, transforming into a streak of silver light. Gwen's pupils constricted, and she tried to dodge mid-air, only to see the longsword barely grazed her, dragging the spider silk attached to her wrist with it. No! Gwen's mouth dropped open slightly. Her slender body paused in mid-air before being dragged backwards by the spider silk clinging to the sword. The longsword lodged itself firmly in the iron gate on the top floor, sinking all the way to the hilt. At this moment, Gwen displayed superhuman reflexes. Just before her body was about to collide with the gate, she tugged at the silk attached to the railing with one hand, dissipating some of the force of the throw. She then flipped a half-circle in the air, adjusting her stance, her feet lightly and steadily resting against the gate. Before Gwen could turn, a shadowy figure swooped down from behind her. "Get out of my way!" Gwen launched a fierce kick backward, but Nian, pursuing her, seemed prepared. One hand firmly grasped her ankle, and with his right knee thrust forward, he pressed her back against the iron gate, pressing her body against it. Fearing he might use something like the ability to shoot spider silk, Nian simply dropped Gwen from the gate to the floor and sat on her bent back. While still holding on to her ankles, he locked both wrists in his other hand. His counter moves were so fluid, as if practiced countless times, that even Nian was amazed. Before this, he'd barely been able to control his strength. His will to survive was simply too strong. Social death? No chance. Gwen did resist and struggle, but it was clear that even the extraordinary could be different. In terms of physical strength, Gwen was completely defeated. This was what shocked Gwen even more. She was strong enough to lift a regular car. And now, with the other person sitting on her, her ankles and wrists pinned down, she couldn't move at all. This feeling of powerlessness was the first she had ever experienced since gaining her spider powers. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8: The Backside of the World. Let me go. Pinned to the ground by someone sitting on her, Gwen, even knowing she was also a woman, felt humiliated and indignant, struggling and shouting through gritted teeth. Nian, who sat on top of her, was now in a dilemma. It was Gwen who had attacked first, and to prevent her from hurting him and seeing his true appearance, he had been forced to retaliate in self-defense. However, even though he had subdued her, he hadn't considered what to do next. Let go of Spider-Woman? Regardless of whether she would attack again, at such close range, if he let go, she'd be able to see his face clearly if she turned around. Nian didn't want to reveal his true identity. His current abilities all came from his aunt, not a natural gift. Perhaps they were just temporary for tonight. By tomorrow, he'd be back to his normal human form. But if he didn't let go, he couldn't just stand there all night. How about knocking her out? Nian's eyes flickered with hesitation, worried he might use too much force. Just as he was thinking about how to temporarily incapacitate Spider-Woman, the struggling Spider-Woman suddenly arched her body, lifting her right foot, the only one free from restraints, high into the air. Her small foot, clad in a custom green low-top shoe, hooked itself like a hook around the neck of Nian, who sat atop her. Huh? Nian's throat was tightly gripped by the nimble, small foot, and he couldn't help but lean back. Knowing that Spider-Woman was trying to break free, Nian held his breath, his left hand firmly grasping her left ankle. His right hand, clasped together, tightened its grip, denying her a chance to break free. Crackling. Bones crackled like frying beans. Up and down, their bodies nearly touching, it felt like a tug-of-war between endurance test. Spider-Woman Gwen, perched below, Her body hunched almost into a crescent shape, her slender waist seemingly ready to break at any moment. Sitting high up, clinging to his spider suit, Nian could clearly sense the astonishing flexibility and strength of the body beneath him. Let go. Nian wanted to scream. Spider-Woman beat him to the punch. Let go. Her tiny foot, hooked around Nian's throat, pulled back with all her might, her delicate body twisting and struggling. Nian's eyes suddenly widened. Spider-Woman's tiny foot, coupled with her constant struggle, was causing his body to move backwards as well. Originally, Nian had been sitting on her back, but now, Nian's hard seat had been upgraded to a soft one, the highest quality. Nian was stunned. He was wearing a short skirt. Spider-Woman, completely unaware of this, noticed Nian's body stiffen, mistakenly assuming he was losing strength, and her struggles intensified. The spider suit's quality was undeniable, but due to its design considerations for outdoor use and breathability, it was even thinner than ordinary jackets and jeans, making it unable to conceal the perfectly curved cleavage. Add to that the wearer's excessive movements. It's broken, Nian muttered, unsure whether this was enjoyable or torture. The boiling blood in his body began to surge downward. What is that? Spider-Woman finally realized what was amiss. Something unidentified was beneath her skirt, pressing against her through the leather of her spider suit. Nian suddenly released his grip on her left ankle and, pulling up the remaining white silk, used it as a rope to wrap around Spider-Woman's hands several times, also wrapping around the small foot around his neck. He did it all in one swift motion. He leaped from Spider-Woman, unsheathed the antique longsword nailed to the iron gate, and, without looking back, leaped towards the tall building across the street. Perhaps it was luck, or perhaps the series of events tonight had given him a certain proficiency in supernatural powers. This time, Nian perfectly controlled her leap, clearing the 20-meter mark and landing precisely on the water tower of the building opposite. With a few more run-ups and leaps, she vanished into the snow-covered city night, shield in hand. 10 seconds passed. Damn you, bastard. I'm going to kill you. Where are you? Get out. After clearing the web from her body, the girl beneath her spider hood's face was filled with shame and rage. Her black and white battle suit seemed to be on fire as it began to frantically fly back and forth between the tall buildings. From half a block away, Nian could hear the girl's angry cries behind her. That's not my fault, Nian chuckled bitterly, looking down at her noticeably bulging skirt. She found a corner on the top floor of a building to hide. A moment later, Spider-Woman swung from a nearby building, web-slinging past, swiftly disappearing into the distance. This time, I can finally go home, Nian breathed out, her skirt now at rest, and emerged from the shadows of the building, sword in hand. Looking around, Nian quickly determined he was at the border of Washington's inner and outer suburbs, over 10 kilometers from his home city center. God knows how he got there. Are you going to jump back? Nian felt a little helpless, but there was nothing he could do. Just as he was about to head back home, something unexpected happened. Boom. The building Nian was standing in suddenly shook. What's this? Nian thought it was just an illusion, but the next second, the building he was standing in felt a distinct tremor again. Nian quickly reacted and looked at the surrounding buildings. It wasn't just a building he was standing in, but all the nearby high-rise buildings were shaking noticeably. Is this an earthquake? Nian thought, then quickly dismissed the idea. No. His 5 senses and awareness now surpassed human cognition, allowing him to perceive things normally invisible to humans. The source of the earthquake didn't seem to be originating from beneath the city's surface, but rather from a single location on the surface of the surrounding area. Boom. 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 Every second or several seconds, the surrounding city and buildings trembled slightly, as if a massive hammer were striking the ground fiercely. Not very far from here, Nian muttered to himself, standing on the top floor of a building, gazing towards the city streets below. It seemed as if his extraordinary perception and judgment were being verified. Boom. Within Nian's sight, a building in the city area 2 or 3 kilometers away suddenly collapsed with a rumbling sound. The city, once immersed in the tranquility and peace of the winter night, was shattered by some unknown horror. And this was just the beginning. Bang, bang, bang. Boom, boom, boom. The deafening sound of gunfire and artillery shells followed one after another, dense and continuous, like thunder in a summer rainstorm, erupting from the collapsed building as the center. Flames shot up into the sky, rapidly spreading in all directions, igniting the surrounding bustling streets and the city sky. Roar, from the city battlefield, which had instantly become a corner of purgatory, a chilling roar echoed. That sound definitely did not belong to human or any animal, directly suppressing the carpet bombardment of modern artillery shells. What is that? Nian opened his eyes wide and looked towards the center of the flames and gun smoke in the distant city. Watching the huge yellow-green shadow flash by, it was as if he had seen the true backside of this world. Chapter 9, Abomination Online. The other side of the world. It lies hidden in the shadows, beyond the reach of sunlight, contrary to the transparent surface of the world, beyond the ordinary human's true understanding. This other side of the world naturally refers to things beyond ordinary human cognition, closely related to the extraordinary, even nurtured by the extraordinary. Superheroes are one such manifestation. But Nian, who has been reincarnated into this world for 16 years, despite learning from elementary school history books about the birth and legendary journey of humanity's first superhero, Captain America, and hearing from those around him about Gotham City's Dark Knight, Batman, who spent over a decade vigilant against evil. Despite the fact that 3 years ago, the billionaire playboy who inherited Stark Industries created the Iron Man suit and became the technological king of New York City, and a year and a half ago, Superman, a Kryptonian who grew up on Earth, powerfully repelled a Kryptonian warship from outer space, becoming a god on Earth. Nian still feels that these extraordinary things on the other side of the world are very far away. This distance, like his past life, was like that. Having always lived in a peaceful superpower, he occasionally caught wind of the relentless modern wars raging in smaller nations across the world from the outside. But his perception of these wars felt big, unreal, and difficult to empathize with. The distance between ordinary humans and the other side of the world was far more brutal than the ancient relationship between slaves and aristocrats. After all, even with the saying the rich rely on technology, the poor rely on mutation, whether it's technology or mutation, transcending the threshold of normal cognition and reaching or possessing transcendence is an extremely low probability for the human population, 1 in 10,000. Nian had given up on becoming a transcendent many years ago, settling into the ordinary life of an ordinary person. Until tonight. First, Nian unexpectedly gained indescribable supernatural powers from his aunt, then encountered Spider-Woman with spider-like abilities outside the city, and now, he witnessed a green monster engaged in fierce battle with an elite army. He had never truly glimpsed, or even stepped halfway into, the other side of this world as he had tonight. So, the city I've always lived in holds so many extraordinary things. A bitter tinge lingered in Nian's mouth, his entire worldview completely overturned. But considering that the most extraordinary of them all was his aunt, with whom he'd lived for over a decade, none of this seemed that significant. No, it wasn't. Nian watched in shock as a fierce battle raged in the city not far away. Concrete buildings crumbled and shattered, artillery fire spread across every inch of the street. The frost and snow that fell from the night sky evaporated before even hitting the ground, leaving bullet shells and rubble strewn across the streets in place of the snow. However, it was the human army that was at a complete disadvantage. In the heart of the city's battleground, Gatling gun barrels mounted on specialized military vehicles blazed red-hot. A barrage of bullets, like a torrent of steel, pierced the deepest reaches of the flames and smoke. There stood a giant green monster, 3 or 4 meters tall, its muscles like lumps of iron, its skeleton bulging with a terrifyingly hard, pale frame. It was completely naked, wearing only a pair of shorts. It was like the embodiment of terror and utter evil. Just one glance sent a shudder through one's heart, sending an endless chill down one's spine. It even had a fitting name. Abomination. Facing a hail of bullets, Abomination leaped back and forth between the buildings and ruins of the street, agility and speed that belied its bulk. Its rapid movement revealed a force powerful enough to shake the very earth and the surrounding city. Crushing the ground, shattering the walls. Ignoring the bullets that barely pierced its skin, Abomination leaped with thunderous force onto a custom-built military vehicle, crushing both soldiers and vehicle into a flattened sheet of metal. It casually scooped up an abandoned taxi, hoisted it overhead like a sandbag, and flung it 20 or 30 meters away, smashing into another military vehicle filled with soldiers. Modern cars, at that moment, looked like children's toys. Boom! A rocket, trailing flames, sped towards the Abomination at breakneck speed. The Abomination raised its arms to shield itself. The exploding flames instantly engulfed its body, and the aftermath shattered the windows of the buildings on both sides of the street. But, the scene that followed filled every surviving soldier with despair. Above the ground where the rocket had exploded, scorching flames swept back along its white skeleton and green flesh, revealing the abomination's hideously horrifying, demonic grin and intact body. The ensuing battle, no. It would be a one-sided massacre, still ongoing. Watching this scene from afar, Nian frowned. The presence of this green-yellow monster filled him with a profound sense of danger. He could survive a fall from more than 10 floors, but if he encountered this monster, he might die. Nian's extraordinary perceptions honed his judgment. This monster was a dangerous presence capable of killing him. It's late. Just pretend you didn't see anything and go home. Auntie will be worried. Nian looked away, unwilling to watch the army being brutally slaughtered in the distance. He had never dreamed of becoming a superhero, he simply admired their abilities. As for the saying, with great power comes great responsibility? If his life wasn't in danger, Nian would be more than willing to help, but now he was risking his life. Having died once in his previous life, Nian cherished his life dearly. In this life, the only person he would risk his life to protect was his aunt. Gwen, second only. Nian was just making up his mind to leave when, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a figure slip through the gaps between the towering buildings opposite, swaying on webs as it flew towards the city area that had become a battlefield 2 kilometers away. It was the Spider-Woman he had met on the rooftop. That guy, don't go that way. Nian's heart skipped a beat. After their brief exchange, he knew Spider-Woman was no match for him. The disparity in strength was too great. If Spider-Woman went to fight, there was only one possible outcome, death. But it was too late to stop them. Nian could only watch as Spider-Woman's slender figure advanced deeper into the city, where the sound of gunfire was fading. I'm sorry. I only have one life, and I can only use it on those two. Nian gritted his teeth, stopped reading, and turned to leap away in the opposite direction of the urban battlefield. Chapter 10 God is dead. In less than 10 minutes, an entire, well-armed, modern American force fell to the hands of the abomination. Humans wailed, flames raged, and a corner of the once prosperous and peaceful city was reduced to a living hell. Like a monster crawling from hell, born for slaughter, the abomination's feet stomped the flat car hull, oozing thick blood. It glanced down at its clenched fists, feeling the unparalleled power within its body. Its face, a human-like grin of madness and satisfaction, shone. Don't kill me. The rifle in its hand fell to the ground with a crisp bang. The sole surviving American soldier stood before the shattered building, horrified as he gazed on his comrades, instantly shattered. His inner spirit and fighting spirit seemed to be completely shattered in that moment, and his feet, powerless, knelt on the blood-soaked ground. With it, his lifelong faith was shattered. The overwhelming display of power, transcending all common sense, made the American soldier wonder if even a god could exist. He would be smothered by the unstoppable monster before him. The abomination smirked at the American soldier, showing no sign of letting him go. It took a death-like step forward, and the earth trembled and wailed with its footsteps. The American soldier knelt motionless, his hands weakly supporting the ground, awaiting death. Just as the abomination debated whether to crush the soldier alive with his hands or crush him to pulp with his feet, a figure suddenly passed through the firelit night sky behind him. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 3 consecutive volleys of white spider webs struck the abomination's bald head. Reaching for the back of his head, the abomination clutched at the back of his head, his palm stained with the tough, sticky white silk. A stunned expression, the abomination turned to look behind him, at the clock tower, a section of which was missing. Atop the tower, crouched atop it, a human girl in a black and white spider suit. Big guy, come play with me. Spider-Gwen looked down at the abomination and hooked her finger provocatively. Without hesitation, she yanked her web backwards and flew away. Roar. The abomination roared to the sky, ignoring the American soldier and stomping its feet backwards. As the ground on the road cracked and collapsed, the abomination, like a human missile, slammed down on the top of the clock tower. Without a moment's pause or attempt to gather momentum, it leaped straight towards Gwen, who was flying and pulling on the web. The American soldier watched in stunned silence until a young man's voice came from the side. Hey, uncle, why don't you get out of here while you can? The American soldier instinctively looked in the direction of the voice, but saw only a blazing ruin. No one was speaking to him. However, thanks to this, he finally regained his composure, struggled to his feet, and stumbled away from this unforgettable battlefield. Inside a building beside the highway, its residents safely evacuated, a silver-haired young man stood behind the windowsill, a round shield slung over his shoulder and a longsword in hand. It was none other than Nian. Nian sighed softly, his mind unfathomable. After weighing the pros and cons, he wondered why, having already chosen to leave, he suddenly followed Spider-Woman back into the city's battle zone, where the army had been routed. He couldn't let go of Spider-Woman, who had so lonesomely ventured into the war zone. She was clearly just a mysterious figure with extraordinary powers whom he had just met. Never mind, now that I'm here, let's see what happens. Nian gripped the antique longsword in his left hand and leaped forward from the windowsill, landing on the rooftop of the church across the street, 30 meters above the ground. Nearby stood the bell tower, recently destroyed by the abomination, only a fragment remaining. He crouched low, concealed, and observed the urban area ahead. Spider-Woman seemed to understand she couldn't confront the abomination head-on, so she used her webs to dart through deserted streets. Her nimble, petite frame nimbly weaved between tall buildings, exploiting windows and alleyways barely wide enough for her own body, but despite this, the abomination remained firmly on her tail. Instead of closing the gap, the distance between them dwindled even closer. The abomination, unconcerned with the shelter of buildings, simply charged and leaped. Everything in its path was instantly crushed to dust by its green form. Boom! Another roar, like a human missile, descended. This time, the abomination flew over Spider-Woman's head, stomping a hole through the building's outer wall. The abomination grasped a corner of the eaves and clung to the outer wall, its massive hand reaching out for the passing Spider-Woman. At the critical moment, Spider-Woman tugged on the web behind her and turned back, narrowly avoiding the abomination's grasp. The white hood on her head was shredded into shreds by the mere touch of the green hand. Roar! Abomination, growing increasingly furious, continued to pursue Spider-Woman as she dived into an alley. That was a close call. Watching from above, Nian was horrified, but suddenly realized that Spider-Woman was far more formidable than he'd imagined. However, even if she continued to flee, she would only be buying time. No, she's not just running away. Nian's eyes lit up, a sudden realization dawning. He stared intently at Spider-Woman, who was deliberately luring abomination into the crowded city. Crack, 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 the walls on both sides of the alley were clearly damaged. Abomination, surging from the alley, was covered in dust and dirt. It stared at Spider-Woman, who had once again dived into a long, narrow alley. Veins of anger bulged across its head and forehead. The abomination roared like thunder as it madly charged into the alley's entrance, expanding it 2 or 3 times its width. But this time, as it rushed out from the other end of the alley in a rage, it felt as if it had stumbled into a massive spider's nest. The alley's exterior was covered in a dense web of white spider silk, anchored to the intact buildings on all 4 sides. Nearly 100 strands of silk appeared, forming a massive web trap just outside the alley. A normal abomination might not have been caught, but now, in its rage and hatred, it crashed directly into the web. Now, Nian, watching from high above the church, echoed his judgment. Spider-Woman, her back clinging to the building's wall, rapidly flicked her wrists to shoot out silk threads. These threads clung to the abomination's head and limbs, securing them like iron chains to the surrounding walls. For about 5 seconds, the abomination was almost wrapped into a huge cocoon by the spider silk, with its face, mouth and nose also sealed, and it was completely imprisoned and connected to the surrounding buildings. Amazing, I really underestimated her. Nian, who was observing secretly, couldn't help but admire. After almost exhausting the spider silk content on her body, Spider-Man finally breathed a sigh of relief and sat exhausted on the high-altitude outer wall. Perhaps because there was no one around, she pulled the lower end of the spider hood up slightly, revealing the girl's delicate and beautiful chin, a small mouth that was constantly breathing, and a tall and pretty nose. No way. Nian suddenly shuddered all over. Although only half of her face was exposed, Spider-Man looked very much like someone he knew. Chapter 11, Who do you tame, who do you get angry about? As the night wore on, the cafe gradually began to fill up. However, many customers, both men and women, while sipping their coffee or milk tea, frequently cast their gazes towards the immaculate woman at a corner table, yet, under her overwhelming presence, they hesitated to sit too close. Diana, a striking sight, rose from her chair and said goodbye to Barbara, who sat across the table from her. That's all I had to say. If nothing else, I'll be leaving now. It's late, and my children back home will be worried. What, a child? Cups tumbled to the floor. The men and women at nearby tables, who had been trying to approach her, overheard Diana's words. Their pretentious demeanors vanished, their expressions betraying a sense of dejection and despair. Barbara was equally shocked by this unique address, confirming Nian's place in Diana's heart. But perhaps no one could have imagined it? That gods could truly become family with humans. Barbara stared at Diana for a long moment, finally whispering, "You can't keep this a secret from him forever." "Of course," Diana said softly, her flawless face adorned with a faint smile. "When he turns 18 and fully matures, I'll tell him everything he wants to know. It's up to him to choose the life he wants to lead, and I respect his opinion. But right now, I won't allow anyone to disturb that child." At the end, a cold glint flashed in Diana's eyes, and she turned and stomped out of the cafe. "He's just an ordinary human boy," Barbara shook her head in disbelief. Recalling Diana's earlier words, she suddenly smiled and muttered, "Zinnian Prince. How on earth did you do it? I really want to meet you in person someday. How had a child adopted by the gods tame the gods?" Diana left the cafe, looking up at the light snow falling in the night sky. A vague thought welled up in her mind. Was that child now buried in homework at the table, or sitting on the sofa watching TV, or perhaps already asleep in his bed? It didn't matter what. Diana suddenly longed to see Nian, to kiss the child's face, to hold him carefully, just as she had done in the past 16 ordinary days. "So, I'm afraid too," Diana whispered softly, touching the snow in her palms, feeling the slight chill. This morning, upon learning that Barbara had shown Nian photos of her from World War I, Diana felt just as uneasy and apprehensive as Nian. Diana worried that Nian, upon learning she was a descendant of the gods, that she had lived for centuries without age, would see her as a monster and alienator, potentially upending their lives. So, Diana concealed her true identity as Wonder Woman. After buying a hamburger at the cafe, Diana grabbed her takeout bag and began her journey home. Seeing police cars parked on the road below and numerous officers patrolling, Diana suddenly felt a sense of foreboding. She quickly entered the elevator and returned to her apartment. Diana took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and pushed it open. Suddenly, a cold wind howled in from the shattered floor-to-ceiling balcony window, ruffling Diana's black hair as she stood in the doorway. The pitch-black living room was filled with badly damaged furniture, and the floor bore visible signs of wear and tear. Furthermore, from Diana's perspective, the armor and weapons she had hidden in the living room ceiling, the starlight crown, the silver bracelet of protection, the sword of Vulcan, the divine shield, the lasso of truth, had all vanished. Something's happened. Diana clenched her hands, her beautiful eyes radiating a calm, emotionless presence. It was as if her divinity was amplified infinitely. Meanwhile, elsewhere, pedestrians evacuated the smoke-filled urban war zone. Nian, crouching on the church's rooftop, a look of disbelief filled his face. How could it be her? Nian stared intently at the battlefield not far below. Spider-Woman's hood lifted, revealing the lower half of her youthful face. She looked uncanny like his childhood sweetheart, Gwen Stacy. If it weren't for the fact that the opponent was currently weaving the mightiest abomination and, in a surprising move, sitting atop a 10-meter-high building, Nian would have almost determined Spider-Woman's true identity. However, Spider-Woman's voice was clearly wrong. Is it just a resemblance? Before Nian could ponder, the situation below took another turn. The sound of several strong spider threads snapping echoed. As Spider-Woman watched in astonishment nearby, several strands suddenly snapped, unable to withstand the pressure. While more threads remained anchored to the building's exterior, they collapsed the next moment. The wall holding the threads was pulled down along with the threads, collapsing. A rumble. The earth shook, and dust rose instead of snow. The entire building, including the one Spider-Woman sat on, collapsed, and Spider-Woman was caught off guard and fell. She was mid-air, about to launch a new web of silk and soar upwards, when a massive green hand violently broke through the web and the outer wall, its 5 fingers gripping Spider-Woman's waist like a vice, pincering her hands and trapping them together. Amidst the dust, a pair of cold, terrifying green eyes opened. "Let me go!" Spider-Woman cried out in despair. No matter how hard she strained, The hand remained motionless. This terrifying, inhuman strength reminded her of the cross-dressing pervert she had encountered on the rooftop. The abomination grinned grimly. Against its 3-meter-tall, behemoth frame, the tiny Spider-Woman seemed as small as a baby. Naturally, it didn't release its grip on Spider-Woman's left hand. Instead, it raised its other hand and wrapped its right around its own tightly held one. As the abomination's two hands exerted combined force, the grip gradually shrank inwards, and Spider-Woman's struggles diminished. Blood flowed from her tightly pursed lips. Clearly, the abomination was going to crush her to death. Spider-Gwen's legs gradually drooped downward, completely losing the strength to resist. Her consciousness began to fade. Am I going to die here? Wait, I haven't even put on my white wedding dress yet. Gwen thought unwillingly, and then her vision went black and she passed out. However, in her final moments of unconsciousness, as if revolving around a revolving lantern, she heard a familiar young man's voice. Let her go. A flash of silver light flashed, splitting the inky night and crimson flames overhead. The abomination was completely unprepared for a sneak attack. Even if it knew, it wouldn't care. After all, even firearms like rockets couldn't penetrate its defenses, let alone a mere cold weapon. So, it simply let the tip of its sword grow larger in the reflection of its pupil. This time, it was wrong. Puff. The ancient longsword instantly shattered the hard and closed eyelids, and the right eyeball within exploded. A section of the sword blade completely sank into the abomination's eye socket. How could this be possible? The abomination froze, its single remaining eye suddenly widening as it stared intently at the silver-haired youth who had descended from the sky onto its arms. I'm curious. Monster, do you feel pain? Perhaps due to the divine power he inherited, Nian's face remained remarkably calm, not a single emotion betrayed. Yet, precisely because of this, his current, bizarre fury was revealed. Chapter 12 The Collision of Counterfeits. Do monsters feel pain? Nian, clad in female combat armor, asked expressionlessly. He stepped on the abomination's raised arms and thrust downward with his hands gripping the antique longsword, driving the patterned blade deeper into his eye socket. Ah! His right eye was punctured, and with a splitting headache, Abomination couldn't help but scream, finally releasing his grip on Spider-Woman. As Spider-Woman was about to fall to the rubble, Nian yanked out his longsword with lightning speed, sending a spurt of hot, foul-smelling green blood gushing out. He reached back with his left hand, grasping Spider-Woman's slender waist, and fled at top speed, escaping the smoke-filled city. As he and Spider-Woman rushed several dozen meters, Abomination, standing behind him, clutching his bleeding right eye, roared to the heavens like a volcano about to erupt. A piercing, terrifying roar, practically a sound wave, shook the air within 100 meters, and burning flames retreated in fear from the abomination's presence. Countless glassware shattered from the humming sound waves, and abandoned cars parked on the road honked their horns in alarm. The wounded abomination was truly furious this time. Before Nian and Spider-Woman could escape more than 100 meters, they felt something whizzing toward them from behind. Turning back, they saw a military 4x4, hurtling through the night sky above the city. No, there were more than one. Besides the 4x4 tossed by the abomination, there were also taxis, vans, and even a massive bus. 4 or 5 vehicles descended like meteorites, carrying a tremendous force. Nian, holding Spider-Woman, sword in hand, leaped forward at lightning speed, dodging one car after another. The cars that missed the target crashed to the ground, sending sparks and debris flying, before exploding into a ball of fire. After narrowly dodging a third van that rolled past, Nian's space for maneuver was severely limited. Before he could even catch his breath, a bus, blaring its warning siren, approached. The bus's massive shadow enveloped both Nian and Spider-Woman. This time, there was no escape. In that moment, dominated by divine power, Nian remained imperceptibly calm. Holding Spider-Woman in one hand, he suddenly stopped, his feet slamming into the ground as he braked. Turning back to meet the crashing bus, Nian took a deep breath and swung his right hand forward with all his might. Swish! Air, smoke, dust, flames, everything within 3 meters was cleaved in two. Simultaneously, the bus was severed by Nian's sword, its body splitting in two, the metal section smooth as a mirror. The two halves of the bus continued their momentum, tumbling backwards from either side of him, transforming into 2 piles of flaming scrap metal. Whoosh! Nian's hand gripping the ancient longsword trembled slightly. He had just exhaled a breath of turbid, hot air when a giant green-yellow figure suddenly descended close behind him, the surrounding ground instantly slumping under its weight. It was Abomination. Nian's silver-glowing pupils shrank slightly. He immediately realized that throwing the car was just a cover-up. He had underestimated Abomination. Despite his injured right eye and extreme anger, the opponent had abandoned his previous recklessness and employed a battle tactic not normally employed by others. Abomination's face twisted and grimaced, and as he landed, he punched Nian in the back. The air exploded, and the wind pressure became chaotic. The antique longsword in his hand slipped from his grasp, pinning it to the ground. Nian, along with Spider-Woman, was sent flying by the blow, flying 20 or 30 meters through the air before crashing through the outer wall and into a building. Cough cough, Nian coughed, rising from the ground. He held Spider-Woman tightly in his arms, using his own body to withstand the impact. He felt his blood and ki turbid. Despite the Abomination's punch, which could have toppled a building, he suffered no noticeable injuries. Nian seemed to have a thought and reached out to remove the antique round shield he had been carrying. A faint ripple of energy rippled through the dark gold shield, then quickly dimmed and faded. The patterned surface of the unknown material showed no sign of damage. "It's this shield." Nian's eyes lit up. He had almost forgotten about the shield he had brought from home. Since then, the golden rope that appeared and disappeared at that moment contained a transcendental power, capable of freely expanding and contracting, transforming, and entrapping anything, tangible or intangible. The antique longsword was incredibly sharp, capable of easily slicing through anything, even metal. So, this shield was no ordinary shield. The fact that it had withstood and neutralized the Abomination's punch only served to prove its extraordinary nature. Furthermore, the remaining combat boots and bracelets might even possess hidden extraordinary abilities. Is this a full set of divine armor? Nian was speechless, but a realization finally dawned on him. Escape with the others was no longer feasible. To defeat this monster, this imposter goddess must unleash the full power of his arsenal. "You, stay away from me." Meanwhile, in a dark corner of the second-floor lobby of the building into which Nian had been sent flying, a man in a U.S. military uniform huddled on the ground, watching with fear as Nian and Spider-Woman appeared. "You." Nian recognized him instantly. It was the soldier who had been nearly killed by the Abomination. Perhaps due to the rampage of the Abomination in this area, the American soldier had been unable to escape and had chosen to hide here, awaiting reinforcements. Without thinking too much, Nian put Spider-Man on the sofa and said to the American soldier, "Protect her." The American soldier nodded in panic. He looked at Nian again, and saw that Nian was holding a dark gold round shield, turned around and jumped out of the windowsill on the second floor. The American soldier stood up with the help of the wall and looked outside the windowsill. When his eyes followed Nian's figure to face the hatred, his mouth opened wide in surprise, and his three views were still collapsing and reorganizing. There was a moment of silence. The American soldier turned on the communicator on his body again and reported with a trembling voice, "Report to the general, this is the Zero Front area, our army has been completely defeated. Now, a mysterious person is fighting against the hatred." The communication is repeated, "Someone is fighting against the hatred. Received, please reply." The communicator crackled with a rustling noise, perhaps due to poor signal, leaving no reply. The earth and sky were ablaze with a burning straits. Seeing Nian emerge, the Abomination was momentarily baffled. Despite its vaunted invincibility, a full-strength punch hadn't killed the opponent, nor had it even severely injured him. Even more baffling was the fact that Nian had dared to attack. This was the ultimate humiliation. The Abomination's furious roar echoed again across the night sky of the city. It seemed to transform into the most primitive, savage, and ferocious beast, charging recklessly towards Nian. It abandoned any so-called cunning tactics, which, after all, were only the means of weak humans. This invincible body, perched atop the biological pyramid, transcended stratagems, technology, and more. This was the Abomination's unwavering belief in invincibility. Nian's speed grew faster and faster, his silver eyes cold and ruthless, like an ancient god resurrected from ancient times. Facing the impending encounter with the Abomination, he executed a single move, a shield strike. Chapter 13: The True Way to Open the Artifact. A yellow figure and a silver figure clashed at high speed on the streets of Washington. As the abomination's bulging right fist collided with Nian's raised dark gold round shield, the American soldiers watching the battle from the rooftop of the building behind them would likely never forget the horrifying scene they witnessed. The moment fist and shield collided, the air froze, and half the street was silent. The silence was so deafening that one could only hear their own heartbeats and breathing, and the survivors involuntarily held their breath. The next moment, a terrifying, translucent shockwave radiated outward, centered around the green monster and the silver-haired boy. The ground beneath their feet was instantly stripped of its surface, and the already shattered streetlights, windows, car windows, and glass doors on the street were completely shattered by the shockwave. It was like a modern missile exploding on the spot, or like a meteorite falling from the sky. Despite being nearly 30 meters away, the American soldier was still blown away by the aftermath. His ears were ringing, and his body was thrown into the living room, where the powerful wind pressure held him still. And this was only the beginning of the battle. The abomination's fist pressed against the dark gold round shield, and continued to exert force. The shield's surface glowed with a hazy divine energy, blocking enough force and impact. But even the small amount that remained still shattered the ground beneath Nian's feet. Nian blocked the abomination's punch with his shield. His eyes glimpsed the abomination's arm and landed on the longsword stuck diagonally in the ground behind it. Without the ancient longsword, even the abomination's defenses could not be penetrated. This was why Nian chose to take the initiative. He held the dark gold round shield without retreating, trying to avoid the abomination and reclaim the ancient longsword. The abomination seemed to understand Nian's intentions, grinning grimly, and brought his other fist down from above, not giving him any chance to escape. Bang! The road beneath him, cracked like a spider web, collapsed first, forming a circular crater half a meter deep. Nian stood in the center of the crater, his combat-booted feet sunk deep into the ground. Facing an unprecedented crisis, he remained upright, his hands firmly supporting his dark gold buckler. Even during the day, he was just an ordinary middle school student. Nian's composure now was incredible, even to his own surprise. Perhaps it was the divine power he inherited from his aunt, making his ordinary human emotions transparent. Or perhaps he was simply born for combat. While using his shield to block the abomination's frantic blows, Nian rapidly pondered a countermeasure. Besides his longsword, what else could he possibly use as a weapon? That's right. Just as Nian was thinking, the abomination suddenly loosened its fist, grasping the dark gold buckler, while its other hand struck Nian's head from the side. Nian didn't hesitate, his right hand immediately releasing the buckler and raising his arm as a shield. A massive green fist struck the back of Nian's hand, no, more precisely, the silver bracelet on his wrist. A surging surge of silver energy emanated from the bracelet, forcibly neutralizing the abomination's punch. I knew it! Nian exclaimed in delight. Covered in divine weapons, this was no joke. After failing to land his blow, the abomination suddenly swung his head forward like a giant green hammer, sending Nian and his shield flying 50 meters away. His body tumbled across the ground like a skipping stone, before crashing into a car door, causing the car's body to dent inwards dramatically. I almost lost it. A crown, isn't it a defensive piece? Nian nearly fainted. Lying flat on the wrecked car, he felt a burning pain on his forehead and simply removed the silver crown from his head. The silver crown was flawless, its carvings intricate and ornate. However, as a defensive weapon, it seemed rather inferior, compared to the round shield and bracelets imbued with divine protection. But as he held the silver crown in his hand, Nian was quickly stunned. Why did it resemble some kind of ranged weapon? Could it be? Nian thought of a possibility. He stood up with the silver crown in hand, looked up at the pursuing abomination, and suddenly threw it forward with all his might. If my aunt knew, she wouldn't hit me, right? This thought flashed through Nian's mind. With a swish, the crown flashed through the darkness, transforming into an imperceptible, fine silver light. The abomination paused in its charge, and a flower of blood emanated from its left eye. The silver crown swirled around its body, swirling and returning to Nian's hand. Looking at the silver crown in his hand, unstained by a trace of blood and still as magnificent as ever, Nian felt a chill. Who could have imagined? This seemingly elegant and noble silver crown was also the most unstoppable hidden weapon. Or perhaps, this was the true way to unlock the divine weapon. After his right eye was reduced to a bloody slit, his left eye also bore a noticeable scar. The abomination, unable to accept what was happening, opened its single, blood-soaked, slitted eye wide, its bloated body rustling with the wind as it recklessly lunged at Nian. Its silver eyes reflected the approaching abomination. Nian didn't hesitate, quickly shielding himself with his left arm, clasped with a bracelet. As if that wasn't enough, he raised his right hand as well. To Nian's surprise, as he crossed his hands in front of him, the bracelets clashed together. It was as if a unique mechanism was triggered. The bracelets on his left and right hands clashed, creating a clear ringing sound. In that brief moment, Nian felt the divine power within him ignite and evaporate, converging at the point where his wrists intersected. Buzz! A massive, unknown energy exploded near Nian, yet it didn't harm him at all. Everything around him, including the dust and the abominations that pounced upon him, was blasted away by this destructive energy. Bang! 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 The abomination flew backwards, crashing into a building behind it, then piercing through it and blasting through the back, crashing into a second building even further behind. Finally, it crashed into the outer wall of a third building. The abomination came to a stop, furious and frustrated, wanting to vomit blood. Can you imagine? Just when it had finally reached level 100, thinking it was invincible in this world, a level 70 challenged it. It tried to pin the other creature to the ground, but the other creature revealed a full set of max-level divine gear. Chapter 14 The End of the War. Sprawled across the rubble of the collapsed building, the abomination couldn't accept the reality of the situation. With a body that rivaled, if not surpassed, the Hulk's, he was the one being struck down. This was the worst possible outcome. Roar. The abomination roared in fury, but even its roar seemed weak. He wanted to tear that man apart alive, crush every inch of his flesh and bone into pulp, using his blood to avenge his own wounded and humiliated state. The abomination thought this with a venomous and evil heart. But before it could rise again, its left eye, obscured by blood, suddenly lit up in the green of its vision. Whoosh! The sword's tip pierced the dust cloud that filled the ruins, piercing the sound barrier along with it. So, the sword's tip struck first, and the sound of the sword piercing the sound barrier followed closely behind. The abomination reacted quickly, grabbing the longsword, but the tip still reached its throat. The sharp, antique blade pierced through the tough skin, piercing deep into the flesh, drawing blood. It all happened so suddenly. Only then did the abomination notice the silver-haired youth sprinting toward him. Do you still think you're the only hunter? Nian's silver hair flew wildly, his eyes fixed on the abomination without any emotion. The moment he chose to fight with his shield, the roles of hunter and prey were reversed. And when he unintentionally triggered his ability to knock the abomination away, reclaiming the antique longsword, he had seized the initiative. Now, Nian, pursuing his victory with all his might, aimed to turn this brief advantage into a winning advantage. I've never killed a human, but since you're a monster, it doesn't matter. Nian spoke emotionlessly. At the same time, he channeled the remaining divine energy within him, along with all his remaining strength, into his hands and feet, thrusting his sword forward with all his might. A sizzle. Corrosive green blood continuously flowed from the abomination's throat and palms. The ancient longsword inched forward, like a giant nail driving into the abomination's throat. He had never expected to be cornered. The abomination's single remaining eye widened, the expression of disbelief fading, replaced by a maddened grin. A sudden sense of foreboding seized Nian, but he couldn't stop or retreat now. If he lost this opportunity, and the abomination recovered, he wouldn't be able to kill it, let alone escape. Yes. Now, he, too, had forced himself into a corner. The abomination suddenly loosened its grip on the sword, allowing it to penetrate deeper into his body without hindrance. This move caught Nian by surprise. Then, the abomination stretched out its hands, its fingers gripping Nian's body and head, tightening its grip. Almost instantly, Nian felt as if his body were being crushed by two mountains, suffocating him. So that's how it is, Nian understood the abomination's intention. In this life-or-death situation, it abandoned defense and chose to continue its attack. Clack. Nian's bones crackled like frying beans, every inch of his body straining, as if his entire body was about to burst at the breaking point. Encircled by the abomination's massive hand, he couldn't see the other's current physical condition. Even if his throat was pierced, would that still not kill him? If this continues, I might be the first to die. Nian knew this all too well, but he knew even more clearly that the abomination was forcing him to stop. The opponent must have reached his limit, otherwise, With his strength in close combat, he wouldn't have been able to hold out for more than 10 seconds. Now it's already been over 10 seconds, which means his strength has waned. If he stops, gives up, he'll truly lose. Nian gritted his teeth and persevered, pushing his sword forward with all his might, then swinging it to the left. But the sword seemed to be stuck between his muscles and bones. No matter how hard Nian tried, he couldn't swing the ancient sword even a little. In the dark building, Nian and the abomination faced each other. Nian plunged his sword into the abomination's throat, while the abomination held Nian's body in his hands. The fight between the two was about to end. But until the last second, there was no way to tell who would be the loser, who would be the winner, or whether both would perish. My body, I can't hold on any longer. Nian's body was about to collapse, but he still couldn't swing the sword. Is this the end? Nian was unwilling to give up, pouring his last bit of strength into the sword. Puff! The longsword in his hand suddenly exploded and slashed to the left. Nian was startled for a moment, and the hand holding him lost its strength and fell to the ground with a thud. He opened his eyes and saw the abomination whose head and body were nearly torn apart, only a piece of flesh remaining at the other's throat. The same deep resentment lingered in his single eye. Finally, I won. Nian was momentarily in disbelief, forgetting his own exhaustion as he stumbled, his feet losing their balance. However, his back didn't collide with a rebel, but with a very familiar embrace. What do you think? A clear, pleasant voice echoed in his ears. Nian's eyes widened, and he saw the person he most wanted to see in this life or death moment. Auntie, Auntie. Nian didn't even realize when he had cried out involuntarily. Look at what you've done to yourself, Diana said, her tone tinged with reproach. And, I was wrong. Nian, who was gambling his life with a hatred just a moment ago, now looked like he was listening obediently with his ears drooping, which made Diana angry and amused. But it was mostly luck. She was lucky enough to catch up. Let's talk about it when we get home. Diana was over 1.8 meters tall, and at this moment, she was wearing a set of armor that shone with gold, like a golden knight. She also acted decisively, holding Nian's legs and holding him up in a princess hug. In the arms of the mature and tall Diana, the middle school student Nian looked petite, with silver hair lightly covering the golden armor, like a pair of knight and princess. Well, it seemed that there was nothing wrong. Nian even pulled the hem of her skirt with her hand to avoid exposing herself, although no one saw it. Diana glanced at the corpse of the hatred on the ground, pulled her hand from Nian's body, and pulled out a golden rope from somewhere. Crashing through the remaining ceiling of the building, Diana soared into the sky, carrying Nian with her. The lasso caught something in the night sky, and the two of them quickly disappeared into the night. Right, Nian said, his arms clasped around his aunt's slender neck. He seemed to remember something. What's wrong? Diana asked, using the lasso of truth to carry him high above the city buildings. Yeah, it's okay. Nian turned around, his peripheral vision suddenly catching sight of a small figure flitting between the tall buildings in the city below him. He shook his head and said, "Dot." Meanwhile, within the city, the flames and smoke had not yet dissipated. Is it over? The American soldier remained lost in thought for a long time, staring at the abominable, decapitated corpse in the distance. Then, his communicator chimed, "Support forces are arriving soon. Survivors, please report. Situation? The target is dead." Does that even count as a situation? The American soldier felt like he was dreaming. The monster that had so easily slaughtered his entire unit was finally beheaded? He briefly reported the situation into the communicator, knowing that the subsequent oral and written reports he would have to make upon returning to base would be dreadfully long. However, being alive after tonight was a blessing from God, so what was there to complain about? The American soldier turned back to look inside the house and was startled again. The living room sofa was empty. Spider-Woman, who had been lying unconscious on it, was now gone. No one had noticed. At the edge of the urban area serving as the battlefield, a green figure similar to the abomination, but slightly smaller, lurked in the shadows of a building. Sensing the abomination's life force fading, the giant green figure glanced towards the corner of the night sky, curious yet belligerent. Finally, its body vanished into the darkness behind, as if it had never been there before. The city was turbulent, and the events here, including some detailed footage, would be transmitted to the other side of the world in just half an hour. Regardless, this extraordinary battle concluded tonight, and the subsequent impact was bound to be even more far-reaching. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15, To the Beauty Given by the Gods. Thumb. Clad in golden armor, Diana, holding Nian, descended 100 meters into the night sky with effortless precision onto their balcony. Because the balcony window had already been smashed, Diana took a few steps forward, entering the shabby, dark living room. With a casual toss, Diana's golden lasso reattached itself to the living room ceiling, its radiant light providing temporary illumination. The golden armor draped over her tall figure was dazzling in the golden glow. What's with that attire? Nian couldn't help but take a second look, struck by its regal and austere appearance, unmistakably reminiscent of a goddess from ancient Greek mythology. Diana gave Nian a calm glance and bluntly stated, "You've taken the suit I usually wear outdoors, so I've had to wear the spare golden eagle armor I keep at home." Yet, that made sense. But Nian's mind suddenly went blank. He realized he was still dressed in women's clothing, and everything he wore was intimate apparel. This time, he'd really messed up. And he'd been caught red-handed. "How do you feel?" Diana asked, a hint of a smile, as she surveyed Nian with a meaningful gaze. "How do you mean?" Nian feigned ignorance, tugging at his skirt and calling out in a panic, "Auntie, put me down." Just as Diana lowered Nian from her arms, he suddenly stiffened, feeling as if his body had been hollowed out. His silver hair, once cascading over his shoulders, began to shrink back to its original length, its silvery sheen fading back to black. His divine silver eyes trembled slightly, then instantly returned to the dark brown of his ordinary human form. The transcendental, like a tide, washed away from Nian. His weapons and armor also vanished, the antique longsword, dark gold round shield, silver bracelets, regal crown, and even his dress and armor. All of them peeled off Nian's body and were strung together, one, by the golden ropes above his head. Nian instinctively glanced at the pendulum clock in the living room. It was almost 11 o'clock. The ability of the companion has finally worn off. Did it last about 4 hours? He let out a soft breath and glanced down at his clothes. He was back in his long shirt and casual pants, though they were damp with sweat. It felt as if everything that had happened tonight had been a dream. However, looking up at the armored figure standing beside him, and the golden light radiating from the golden ropes above, it confirmed that everything had actually happened, just now. Diana, clad in the golden eagle armor, and Nian, now a normal person, exchanged glances before quickly looking away. So many unexpected events had unfolded tonight, and these events had revealed the secrets each of them had been hiding. So, amidst a complex and inexpressible mix of emotions, guilt, worry, fear, embarrassment, Diana and Nian were at a loss for words, leaving the living room in a stagnant silence. "You," Diana was about to say. Nian waved his hand, as if finding an excuse, and fled to the bathroom. I'm dirty. I'm going to shower first." Diana was left standing alone in the living room, the bright moonlight streaming in through the window making her seem somewhat lonely. Snap! After shutting the bathroom door tightly, Nian leaned against it and breathed a sigh of relief. If anyone suddenly learned their only relative wasn't human, wouldn't it be unbearable for them? Perhaps because he was a reincarnated being, Nian didn't mind it. Even though they weren't human, this inner conviction never wavered. However, perhaps due to being seen in women's clothing, his own misdeeds, and the various reasons he had hidden, Nian suddenly felt unsure how to face Diana. So, Nian chose to escape, temporarily. After all, he was just a child. With this so-called excuse, Nian stripped off all his dirty, wet clothes, turned on the hot water in the bathroom, and almost collapsed in the spacious tub. Although his extraordinary power had completely left his body, the lingering energy from his recent battle with hatred, as well as the accumulated fatigue and wear and tear, remained. As the slightly scalding water filled the tub, the steam rising from the steam filled the private bathtub. Nian exhaled, and the tension in his heart finally relaxed. He took a wet towel and placed it on his aching forehead. He closed his eyes and lay back in the tub. Just as Nian was clearing his mind and thoughts, there was a knock on the bathroom door. "Just put the clothes you need to change outside the door." Nian did not open his eyes, lying motionless in the bathtub. There was no sound coming from behind the bathroom door, But the next moment, the door suddenly opened with a click. "No need to bring it in specially," Xinian said while glancing at the door. This glance made him completely stunned. It was naturally Nian who opened the door and entered the bathroom. But, she was no longer wearing the golden eagle armor. She held her fluffy and beautiful hair with one hand, and gently grasped a white bath towel with her right hand. The bath towel hung from her chest to her legs, covering something, but it seemed like it was not covered at all. In the hazy steam. At this moment, Xinian suddenly remembered a legend. In Greek mythology, Athena was given all the good blessings by the gods: beauty, strength, wisdom, and honesty. The beauty that existed before her eyes may only be shaped by the legendary gods. Although he had no idea how many times he had seen it, Xinian was still stunned for a moment. Coming back to his senses, he quickly covered his crotch with a towel on his forehead. From childhood to adulthood, what's so good about it? Diana didn't know if she was talking about herself or Xinian. She closed the door again and walked into the bathroom barefoot. "How did you get in?" Xinian stuttered a little. Diana didn't answer, but walked slowly to the front of the bathtub and said softly, "Turn around and make some room." Okay. Xinian almost subconsciously hugged his legs and turned to sit in a corner of the bathtub. Before he could understand the current situation. With a splash, the water in the bathtub, which was already filled, overflowed half a person's worth. Chapter 16 Mythology, Family Affairs. The shower room was filled with steam, so quiet that one could hear the subtle sound of water dripping from the faucet onto the surface. So, is our bathtub really this small? Xinian couldn't help but wonder, feeling like he couldn't stretch his limbs in the tub. Diana chuckled from outside, "You've really grown up. I guess I need to get you a bigger tub." Xinian realized he was being underestimated again and couldn't help but mutter, "Don't treat me like a child all the time. I'm 16 now, after all. According to local laws in Washington state, I'm of legal marriage age." "Yes, it's been 16 years. Time flies," Diana whispered. Xinian fell silent, trying to clear his mind. Diana recalled, "I suddenly remembered my childhood, my master, who was also my aunt." Master. Xinian's eyes widened as he heard Diana recount her childhood for the first time. "Yes, my master, she and my mother, the queen, all lived in a place called Paradise Island," Diana continued. "There, a barrier left by Zeus, the king of the gods, has isolated us from the outside world for millennia. We, the Amazons, live on Paradise Island." Diana spoke calmly and ordinarily, as if she were recounting a perfectly ordinary story. Xinian had never imagined that he would hear such shocking secrets left behind by the ancient Greek gods in such a casual setting as home. Diana continued, "I was originally an Amazon princess, lovingly cared for by my mother and master. Until one day, a fighter plane crashed into the sea near Paradise Island. I left Paradise Island and entered the outside world. This world, at that time, humanity was embroiled in the First World War. Later, I discovered that Ares, the god of war, was behind the war. So, I participated in that brutal conflict, a catastrophe for humanity." Diana then recounted her origins and background, her experience fighting in World War I as Wonder Woman, and her ultimate decision to remain in the human world. From her initial admiration for humanity to her utter disappointment with them. As a demigod, she hid as an ordinary person, living in a human city for nearly a century. Without missing a single detail, Diana's expression was natural, as if she were imparting common sense to her family. Myths and legends, untouchable to humans, now became easy conversations at night. Wonder Woman? Princess of a clan? Daughter of Zeus? Xinian was stunned, having never imagined Diana's identity and background were so profound. If Zeus were still alive, wouldn't he strike him with lightning? Xinian couldn't help but wonder. After explaining her background and her experiences in the world, Diana said with a slightly complicated look, "I'm sure you already know. The woman in that old World War I photo you saw this morning was indeed me. As for my identity, I wanted to hold off on telling you until you were 18. I didn't mean to deceive you." "I know," Xinian exhaled. "You've always protected me from the supernatural, for 16 years." Diana was silent, then asked, "Aren't you angry or afraid about this?" "Why should I be angry or afraid?" Xinian shook his head and smiled. "Even if you suddenly said I was a demon and wanted to eat me, I would willingly accept it. Besides, you're actually a descendant of a legendary god. Having lived with a beautiful goddess and a superhero for so long, what do I have to be angry or afraid of?" Nian let himself go, dancing and splashing water everywhere. Goddess, superhero? Calm down, Diana said, tapping Nian on the head. Yes, yes, yes. Nian covered his head with a slight pain. Then, he and Diana both showed a knowing smile on their faces. The stalemate and estrangement between the two of them completely melted away at this moment. Instead, there was a harmony and tacit understanding of always considering each other's interests. Diana suddenly said, "By the way, tell me the truth about you wearing my battle suit and running outside to fight monsters. Please spare me, I was just about to say it." Nian raised his hands for mercy and organized his words a little. "Actually, I accidentally awakened some superpowers a week ago." Without hiding anything from Diana, Nian truthfully reported the ability status he knew. After listening to Nian's story, Diana's brow furrowed, a glint of understanding in her eyes. "So that's how it is. You triggered this ability while having dinner with me." "Yes," Nian said with a wry smile. "Even I didn't expect that a used water cup could trigger it." Diana's eyes gleamed with wisdom, and she said with even greater surprise, "This superpower seems to be based on the law of cause and effect. But, it can even control the bloodline of a god." Diana thought of the wishing stone she had encountered before. Only a sacred relic left by the gods could possess such extraordinary effects. However, while Nian's ability was time-limited, it had no side effects and no price to pay. Diana's thoughts suddenly turned to her beautiful eyes slightly lit up, and she muttered to herself inexplicably, "I told you that I would give you the opportunity to choose which path to take in the future. I didn't expect you would actually have such an opportunity to choose." "What are you talking about? What conditions?" Nian was confused. "No, I was just thinking about this superpower you've awakened." Diana didn't explain, but instead posed a question. "I was thinking. Just by exchanging cups, you were able to master all of my abilities in 4 hours. And now, you haven't triggered the ability of the Lord of the Familiar." "Indeed," Nian nodded. "Is there a problem with that?" "What I was thinking about," Diana took a deep breath and thought seriously, "if we add a medium or change a different medium, will there be other changes?" Nian felt that Diana's idea was dangerous. However, he had indeed not considered this point. Could it be that the manifestation of the Lord of the Familiar's abilities really change over time or in other ways due to the influence of the medium? Chapter 17 Supergirl, Kara Danvers. The next morning, Kara Danvers, wearing a pair of formal black glasses, carrying a backpack, and walking with her head slightly lowered, entered the school gates. The sounds of the entire high school opened up to her. From the loud clatter and thud of football and basketball players on the school playground to the gentle flutter of a hibernating insect in the grove behind the school building, from the loud discussions and whispers of students nearby to the sleepy yawns of the security guard at the other end of the school. Even if Kara didn't listen, the vast amount of sound information still reached her ears clearly. Kara frowned slightly with discomfort. Fortunately, more than 3 months had passed since she awakened her super hearing. She didn't show any sign of abnormality and walked into the school building as usual. Unlike Kara, who instantly saw through their secrets, the students outside and in the corridors only glanced at Kara and quickly looked away. For them, Kara, a student with no sense of style and a solitary, gloomy personality, was a completely invisible presence in this school. But Kara breathed a sigh of relief. Unnoticed, including by her classmates, she walked briskly through the back door to her seat against the wall. She gently pulled open the sturdy chair, as if afraid of accidentally breaking it. Only after she was fully seated did Kara breathe a sigh of relief. This cautious routine was repeated almost every time she went to school. "Kara, you can do it. Nothing happened this time, nothing was broken," Kara Danvers said to herself, a bright, sweet smile on her face, a beauty that even thick black glasses couldn't hide. It was a pity that no one could appreciate it. Yes, Kara was a Kryptonian hidden in the ordinary world of today, the only remaining Kryptonian in the entire universe. Her real name was Kara Zor-El. The first Kryptonian, of course, was the already famous superhero on Earth, Superman, her cousin, Kal-El. As for why Kara looked younger than her cousin, barely more than a 15-year-old, the story began with the destruction of Krypton. At that time, Kara's parents sent her to Earth, intending she would protect her infant cousin, Kal. Unexpectedly, Kara encountered a wormhole while traveling through space, instantly losing over a decade of time. By the time the ship arrived on Earth, it had already been half a year. By then, her cousin, Superman, had fully grown up and no longer needed Kara's protection. Instead, he helped her find a foster family, the Denver's family, allowing her to live like an ordinary person in an Earth city. Kara glanced at the wall clock. It was about 5 minutes before class started. She pulled out her textbooks to review, but the constant stream of school information continued to fill her ears. The most frequent chatter was, of course, the sound of students talking and discussing. Today, unlike usual discussions of gossip about school couples and famous superheroes, nearly all the students on the 9th floor were discussing the morning news. Although it was morning news, the events had actually taken place last night. A giant green-yellow monster had appeared in an outer Washington district. Armed forces immediately responded, resulting in heavy casualties. News reports, interspersed with blurry and jerky footage from the scene, showed the green-yellow monster ravaging the city and its troops with terrifying force. Later, Spider-Man, a silver-haired goddess, and a golden-armored knight appeared in the urban battle. A short clip of the confrontation between the silver-haired goddess and the green-yellow monster was shown. The clash of shield and fist immediately caused a global sensation and repercussions. The most talked-about topic, of course, was the silver-haired goddess defeating and decapitating the green monster. I unilaterally declare that the silver-haired goddess is my superhero idol from now on. Bah. Get lost. You just said your idol is Superman. Who says just because your idol is Superman, you can't support the silver-haired goddess? I'm a Batman fan, and I love the silver-haired goddess too. She's just too cool. It wasn't just the students. In just one morning, the silver-haired goddess became the most popular superhero, female, in Washington, D.C. Even many middle school teachers, especially the male ones, were banging their desks in their offices, excitedly exclaiming, "Does this mean the silver-haired goddess is a superhero who lives in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area?" It's hard to say. For superheroes with extraordinary talents like them, the distance between cities isn't as far as we think, one teacher reasoned. The others nodded in agreement. Take Superman and Iron Man. While everyone knows they live in Metropolis and New York City, respectively, with their extraordinary abilities, even if they appeared on the other side of the world, it wouldn't surprise anyone. I don't care. She'll be my dream girl from now on. I'll definitely buy any hero merchandise she releases. The male teacher said with a determined look. But who knows what he'd think if he knew the silver-haired goddess's true identity. Silver-haired goddess, Spider-Woman, giant monster. Kara muttered softly, completely unimpressed. Quite the opposite of the average person, Kara was only interested in ordinary human matters. As for the so-called supernatural, her existence as a Kryptonian was the greatest hidden supernatural power of Washington. So, it didn't bother her. Class is about to start. Kara was slightly startled, but she sifted through the chorus of school voices and didn't hear the gentle voice she most wanted to hear. The person didn't pass by the corridor along the wall where her seat was, as usual. Ding. The bell rang for class. Kara quickly glanced upstairs. Suddenly, several layers of walls vanished, revealing a classroom for the advanced students. In a classroom packed with students, 2 seats stood conspicuously empty. The male teacher who had been discussing buying hero merchandise came up to the classroom podium, holding a thermos, and explained, "Today, Nian Prince and Gwen Stacy are taking the day off due to feeling unwell." Unwell? Yesterday, they looked healthy. Kara frowned slightly. What concerned her even more was the whispers that erupted among the students in the classroom. What a coincidence, 2 people taking the day off at the same time. It seems my guess was right. They might really be a couple. So, I don't have a chance. You never had a chance in the first place. Alice, my goddess Gwen. Hearing the heartfelt cries of so many students, Kara's heart couldn't help but tremble. Chapter 18, Visiting the Sick, Gwen's Room. After a sleepless night, Nian lay in bed, practically watching the night outside the window gradually give way to the cool morning light. After all, what happened last night was too much and too exciting. He experienced more extraordinary mysteries than in his 16 years of life combined. And then there was that, in the bathroom. When his aunt mentioned his awakened superpower, the Lord of the Familiar, she didn't show any aversion or objection to his using this strange ability. On the contrary, she was helping him think about the triggering conditions and maximum effectiveness of the Lord of the Familiar's ability, as if she wanted to find an opportunity for him to experiment with the ability, with a strong sense of exploration. So, it wasn't that Nian couldn't help himself, it was just that the theory was too tempting. He unconsciously raised his hand, as if wanting to participate and express his opinion. Xinian didn't know if his aunt saw it when she was helping him rinse the foam from his hair. He only remembered the last words his aunt said in the bathroom. Xinian, what kind of person do you want to be? There's no rush to answer that question. When the time is right, I'll give you the opportunity to choose. No matter what you choose, I'll support you. Xinian pondered all night, still unable to grasp the meaning of the choice and support his aunt was referring to. What choice? How to support? Or rather, Xinian didn't dare to think about it. His superpowered companion, the master, could only truly function with the help of a member of the opposite sex possessing extraordinary abilities. However, this so-called help from the opposite sex required a series of strict triggering conditions, the equivalent of a passive skill. Without the appropriate extraordinary help of the opposite sex, it wouldn't function as a normal ability. So, could the support his aunt was referring to be? Recalling his aunt's initial assumption that liquid is the medium, the more medium, the stronger the effect, Xinian felt his body heat up again. This was the real reason he hadn't slept all night. Fortunately, concerned about the after effects of Xinian's abilities, his aunt had already reported to the school and asked for a day off. Coincidentally, Xinian learned from the school that Gwen had also asked for a day off. The image of Spider-Woman's half-revealed face from last night flashed through his mind. Nian pondered for a moment, then suggested to his aunt, Gwen's caught a cold. I'll go see her after lunch. Diana, naturally knowing Nian's childhood playmate, immediately agreed, that's fine. We're so close anyway. She surveyed the shattered living room. I'll have someone come over later to renovate the living room and put in new furniture. Will it be troublesome? Nian asked, a little worried. The broken footprints and dents on the living room floor, the furniture and window sills shattered by his forceful ramming, all showed that this wasn't just ordinary wear and tear. If they were to connect, the robbery across the street from him might be exposed. No, Diana said calmly, dressed in a sophisticated white shirt and trousers. She said elegantly and calmly, I have some connections. I know the right people to deal with. That's good. Nian finally breathed a sigh of relief, but then became curious about what connections his aunt was referring to. After lunch, Nian changed into his winter coat and headed for Gwen's house. He crossed a pedestrian street, less than 100 meters away, and arrived at the neighboring residential complex. The security guard recognized him and greeted him as he let him in. Xinian, it's been a while, hasn't it? Indeed, it's been a while, Xinian shrugged. It had been okay when he was a kid, but in recent years, Officer George had become increasingly wary of him, like a thief. He even wondered if he had criminal genes and was being targeted. He quickly arrived at Gwen's door, familiar as ever. But as he rang the doorbell, a wave of trepidation washed over him. Fortunately, perhaps a bit of luck, a gentle woman's voice rang from inside, I'm coming. The door opened. Xinian saw a woman, about 38 years old. Though wrinkles appeared around her eyes, she retained a graceful figure and a lively, playful look that bore a strong resemblance to Gwen. It was Gwen's mother, Mary Jane. Xinian, you're here. In contrast to Officer George's treatment, Mary was delighted to see Xinian at the doorway and immediately pulled him inside. Come on, it's cold outside, come inside and talk. I heard Gwen was sick, so I came to visit her. Xinian changed into his slippers on the carpet and glanced inside. Don't worry, Mary said, blinking as if she knew what he was looking at. Gwen's father went out last night and hasn't come back yet. Oh, this. Xinian didn't know what to say. Madam, your hairstyle. No, this is dangerous. Mary continued, Gwen woke up with a fever this morning. I've given her fever-reducing medicine. She should be asleep in bed by now. In that case, I'll be going home first. Xinian looked at Gwen's closed door. Don't disturb her rest. What do you mean by disturbing her? Mary interrupted him with a wave of her hand, urging, you're just in time. Go in and see her. Mary pushed Xinian to Gwen's door and said meaningfully, don't worry. The room is well soundproofed. Even if something happens, no one outside can hear it. Well, I'm just visiting, Xinian corrected, his lips twitching. Of course. Just visiting, a thorough visit. Just don't get sick yourself. Mary's hint was strong. She opened the door, pushed Xinian in, and helped close it again. So, is this really Gwen's biological mother? Xinian smiled wryly, suddenly thinking Officer George was a bit more normal. He looked up. Gwen's room was much as he'd remembered it, clean, tidy, and filled with a faint fragrance. There were plenty of dolls, a true girl's room, and a lot more photos on the bookshelf. Many of them were photos of him and her, treasured treasures he hadn't even developed. He couldn't help but stare a few more times, then his gaze settled on a corner of the room. A beautiful girl with golden hair, like Sleeping Beauty, lay quietly in bed, covered in a down quilt as white as snow. Her delicate mouth and nose pursed with even breathing, her cheeks, as white as a baby's, a slight blush. He approached the bedside and called in a low voice, "Gwen, Gwen." Gwen didn't respond, as if she were fast asleep. He double-checked that his hand wasn't cold before gently brushing aside the golden hair and placing it on the girl's forehead. A faint burning sensation spread across his palm. While the temperature wasn't high, she was definitely running a fever. He silently withdrew his hand. He came to visit Gwen, firstly, to visit her, and secondly, to find out if Gwen had any connection with the female Spider-Man he met last night. Now it seems that he must have seen it wrong. That's right, how could his childhood sweetheart Gwen be the female Spider-Man who was swaying in the sky above the city and was very difficult to mess with? Nian shook his head. But when his eyes fell on the girl, the little mouth that was slightly open to exhale, perhaps partly due to the fever, was more rosy and bright than before, and he was suddenly stunned again. An idea emerged from Nian's mind like a demon. Was he seeing it wrong? Why not try it and you will know. Chapter 19 Band-Aid, Old Housekeeper. The most direct and simple way to trigger the master's power is to kiss, right? It not only fulfills the prerequisites for intimate contact, but also provides a medium for fluid exchange. Deciding to give it a try, Nian looked at the peacefully sleeping Gwen, gently resting his hands on the bed and leaning slightly closer. He was getting within striking distance. Facing the delicate, doll-like face so close, Nian could feel the girl's warm breath caressing his face, accompanied by a very alluring sweet scent. Meanwhile, our classmate Gwen was feigning sleep. Last night, rushing home from the war zone on the Abomination side, she happened to hear her mother knocking at the door. Still wearing her Spider-Woman bodysuit, Gwen nearly exposed herself. Fortunately, she made up an excuse about feeling unwell and didn't open the door. This morning, she used that excuse to stay home and recuperate. Although she was injured in yesterday's battle, her physique meant that any injuries that weren't life-threatening would heal quickly. However, Gwen had never expected this. Nian would skip classes to visit, and his mother had even pushed him into her room. With no other options, Gwen, having been tricked by her own mother, could only feign sleep. As for the feverish sensation on her forehead, it was because her body had been heating up since Nian had entered her room alone. At that moment, though she couldn't open her eyes due to the pretense of sleep, even without using her spider sense, Gwen could clearly sense Nian, who was sitting beside her bed, suddenly leaning in closer, his vision fixed on her face, no lips. Hey. The girl was a little confused, but she remained silent, her hands clenched tightly beneath the duvet. At the same time, a flicker of hesitation crossed Nian's eyes. He paused, then lowered himself completely. Gwen stiffened slightly. A subtle warmth spread across her forehead, then disappeared. Nian quickly straightened up, glanced at the closed door with a guilty conscience, and touched his lips with his fingers, where there was still a trace of burning sensation that could not be ignored. What am I doing? Nian smiled bitterly. Although they were childhood sweethearts and good brothers, she was a girl after all. Kissing on the lips was not allowed. However, the burning sensation on Gwen's forehead intensified a little. There was no doubt that she really had a fever. Nian felt a little guilty and reached out to pull the quilt for Gwen. At this moment, his eyes were attracted by something. It was a band-aid. 3 band-aids were originally covered by the quilt, but because he pulled the quilt, they fell out of the quilt. What is this? Nian took the band-aids in his hand and found that they all showed signs of use, but the bandaged areas were very clean, without any stains of blood or dust. He suddenly remembered his childhood. Gwen loved putting band-aids on herself, especially on her nose, pretending to have a wound, and patting her flat chest. She'd be the boss and protect him. Band-aids, but they were useless for colds, you little fool. Nian smiled, pocketing 3 band-aids before slowing down and exiting the girl's room. Oh, so soon. Mary, who seemed to have been standing guard outside, was surprised. A thick line of black fur crossed Nian's forehead as he emphasized, "Auntie, I'm really just visiting." Really? Mary sighed, her face clearly filled with disappointment. "Mom, What on earth are you expecting? Nian couldn't bring himself to complain. He continued to exchange pleasantries with Mary Jane, then, despite her repeated attempts to stay, fled Gwen's house in a panic. Neither Nian nor Mary knew that, inside the tightly closed room, almost as soon as Nian left the room and closed the door, the beautiful girl, who had been pretending to sleep in bed, quickly straightened up. Her face flushed crimson, and she gasped for breath. She clutched her hands over her still heating face, and steam actually began to rise from the forehead where Nian had touched it. Her mind froze for a few seconds, then she frantically pulled back the covers, searching. Gone. The band-aids are gone. Gwen cried, nearly crying with embarrassment. Those 3 band-aids were, of course, the ones she'd peeled off last night when she changed out of her Spider-Man suit. When she was out and about in the tight-fitting suit, she sweated, and wearing a bra or other clothing would have been incredibly hot and uncomfortable. But wearing nothing in between wasn't ideal. So, whenever she donned her Spider-Man suit, Gwen would always use 3 band-aids. Last night, in her haste to change out of the suit, she hadn't had time to destroy them, so they'd been left on her bed. Could it really be Nian who took him away? Gwen, thinking of the 3 band-aids falling into Nian's hands, immediately burrowed her head under her pillow like an ostrich, steam hissing from the back of her head. No, I'm too embarrassed to face anyone. Returning home. As Nian emerged from the elevator, he saw numerous staff members, all in uniform and without any specific company logos, coming in and out of his home. In the living room, which was being renovated with terrifying efficiency, an elderly man with graying hair in a suit stood there, methodically directing the staff as they renovated and replaced furniture. Upon seeing Nian enter, the old man immediately took off his hat, bowed slightly, and greeted him politely and friendly. You must be the young master of the Prince family, right? Young master. Nian was slightly taken aback. It was the first time in his life that someone had addressed him that way. He didn't know whether to nod or shake his head. I'm Nian Prince. That's right. The old man's eyes were deep and he smiled gently. My name is Alfred Pennyworth. It's a little hard to remember. You can just call me Butler Alfred from now on. Here's my business card. As he introduced himself, he immediately felt in his suit pocket and politely handed over his black business card with both hands. Nian took the card and felt that the other party's etiquette was not very standard. He was obviously just a butler, but he had an elegant temperament that was ingrained in his bones, and his neither humble nor arrogant demeanor made people instinctively like him. This is definitely not something that can be easily faked. It is something that can only be cultivated by a large family over a decade, or even decades. The information on the business card in his hand also happened to confirm this. The card clearly stated, Wayne Industries. Chapter 20 Batman's Invitation. Wayne Industries. I believe everyone in this world is unaware of its significance and value. Although Wayne Industries is often overshadowed by Stark Industries in the technology field at the World Expo and daily news reports, this also demonstrates its unquestionable technological prowess. Moreover, compared to Stark Industries, which focuses on heavy industries such as chemicals, metal forming, satellite communications, and military development, as well as artificial intelligence, the Wayne Consortium behind Wayne Industries also encompasses financial investment, pharmaceuticals, civil aviation, railways, shipbuilding, and even a wide range of light industries such as video games and toys. It's often said that almost half of Gotham City's industries are owned by the Wayne Consortium. This statement is probably no joke. Therefore, Wayne Industries, the consortium, is a truly powerful financial institution worldwide. So, this is the connection my aunt mentioned this morning? As if anticipating Nian's thoughts, Butler Afu waved his hand, and all the staff in the room immediately retreated out the door. Butler Afu smiled and continued gently, I'm actually here on behalf of young Master Bruce Wayne, the head of the Wayne family. I primarily want to meet Miss Diana and discuss some matters with her. Before he could finish, he said, just tell me what you want to say. The outer door suddenly opened, and Diana walked in gracefully and dignifiedly. Miss Diana, Butler Afu bowed slightly, his eyes filled with deep respect. Hello. Diana bowed slightly, then calmly glanced at Butler Afu, took Nian's hand, and sat down on the living room sofa, saying, please sit down. Okay, Miss Diana, I won't be polite then. Butler Afu took a seat on the sofa opposite, his back as straight as a pine tree even while sitting. If you have anything to say, just tell me directly. There's no need to hide it from Nian. Diana repeated her previous words. Yes, I understand. Butler Alpha looked at Nian with a flicker of surprise. After a moment's thought, he spoke. This time, Master Bruce had originally intended to come in person, but something urgent happened in Gotham and he couldn't get away, so he arranged for me to come. Nian's brow furrowed slightly. Bruce Wayne, that name, was as famous as Wayne Industries. After all, he was the current heir to the Wayne Consortium, single-handedly controlling Gotham City's economic lifeline. However, like Tony Stark, the head of Stark Industries, both had less than favorable public reputations, being world-renowned playboys. Butler Alpha continued, Master Bruce's intention is to establish a cooperative relationship with Miss Diana. If Miss Diana wishes, you and your family can relocate to a new residence in Gotham City at any time, and Master Nian will enjoy the best local education, healthcare, and other high-quality services. Cooperation? What kind of cooperative relationship? Nian asked curiously. Bruce Wayne, he's Gotham City's Batman, Diana explained, adding, he's recently been thinking about creating a league whose members will all be exceptionally talented, so he wanted to talk to me about a possible partnership. Oh, so that's how it is, Nian realized. This scene stunned even Butler Alpha. If anyone knew Batman's true identity, they'd probably be overcome with excitement. But this child, as if hearing nothing out of the ordinary, showed no sign of surprise. Little did he know that last night, Nian's family had simply treated the myth as a family affair. In comparison, what was Batman's true identity? The so-called cooperation and alliance are merely concepts right now. Master Bruce doesn't know if they'll ever be implemented. After all, exceptionally gifted individuals aren't easy to find. Butler Alpha smiled, however, we're still willing to pay any price. We hope Miss Diana can settle in Gotham City first. This isn't my promise, it's the promise of Master Bruce and the entire Wayne Group. Butler Alpha's tone grew proud. But no one questioned or resented his pride. If he weren't proud at this moment, he wouldn't be worthy of being the head butler of the Wayne Group. A promise from the Wayne Group would seduce even the president of a country. Diana remained composed and didn't respond. Instead, she looked at Nian and said, Nian, what do you think? Me. Nian was stunned. Butler Alpha was also stunned, his gaze shifting again. Before coming here, he had researched extensively and knew Diana to be a truly intelligent and decisive woman. But now, when facing major issues, Diana asked and emphasized the child's opinion more than once. It was as if Nian was the master of this family. This could not help but surprise and shock Butler Alpha. As for Nian, he suddenly understood at this moment. Aunt Diana looked at him at this time and meant that she was giving him a chance to choose. As long as Nian chose to agree to Butler Alpha's proposal, he could move to Gotham City immediately. Enjoy the best local education, entertainment, medical and other services. Under the care of the Wayne Group, even if he did not work hard and just lay down all his life, he could still live a very high-quality upper-class life. But, Nian shook his head slightly, indicating that he rejected the proposal. Why? Butler Alpha asked, bewildered. Young Master Nian, don't you yearn for life in Gotham City? With the Wayne Group's help, you can get almost anything you want. Nian shook his head again, his eyes gleaming. Butler Alpha, you misunderstood me. I actually do yearn for life in Gotham City. Honestly, the promise and support of the Wayne Group is something few in this world could resist. But why? Alpha was even more puzzled. Because I don't want my choice to influence my aunt's own. You want our family to go to Gotham City out of your respect for my aunt's abilities, not because of me. Nian said calmly, if my aunt is truly interested in your alliance, I'd be happy to see her join, without the promises or support of the Wayne Group. But if my aunt doesn't want to join, then even if you offer me more, I won't accept your offer. I see. Butler Alpha pondered, his eyes reflecting Nian's, a look of deep admiration. That's what I meant. Diana, who had been silent the whole time, said softly, right now, I'm not interested in Bruce Wayne's alliance plan. So, I'm sorry. It's okay. Butler Alpha smiled and stood up. Then I'll take my leave first. I'll go back and tell Master Bruce about your intentions. Butler Alpha, Nian suddenly called him and said, thank you for decorating my home. When I have the chance in the future, I will definitely repay you. This is my promise, the young man said with great sincerity. Butler Alpha nodded, indicating that he remembered it. Chapter 21 Cat, Skyfall vs. Green Plum. Another morning. Nian changed into his winter outdoor gear and headed to school. This was the last day of school this week. The day after tomorrow was Christmas, and all high schools across the United States would be closed for the week-long holiday. Passing the intersection, he didn't run into Gwen as usual, and wondered if she was still on sick leave. Instead, as he passed the intersection near the residential complex, a small orange-yellow animal suddenly jumped out from the park lawn, startling Nian. Perhaps it was because of the night before, when he had opened the door to the supernatural and been frequently exposed to supernatural things. With one foot on the threshold of the other side of the world, Nian felt exhausted, his mind and heart straining as he constantly shifted his perspective. He glanced over cautiously and saw a kitten squatting on the ground. It was less than a year old, slightly frail and small, its orange fur indicating its breed. "It's just a little orange cat," Nian breathed a sigh of relief, but also a wry smile. "I've been so careless lately. The world is so big, how could I possibly encounter something extraordinary so easily? What's up? Are you hungry?" Seeing the kitten without a name tag and looking so filthy and pitiful, Nian knew it was probably a stray cat abandoned in the park. After a moment's thought, Nian ran to a nearby convenience store, bought 3 sausages, and returned. Seeing the biped approaching, the little orange cat quickly retreated into the grass, its emerald green pupils faintly visible, a look of deep wariness in its eyes. "This is edible, look." Nian unwrapped it in front of it, happily devoured one of the sausages, and placed the remaining 2 on the ground in front of the bushes. School was about to start, so Nian didn't linger for long. After he left the park, he looked back and saw the grass in the distance sway violently, and the sausages had vanished. Nian smiled knowingly and continued on his way to school. In the grass, the pair of emerald green pupils watched Nian go away. The kitten licked its paws. Its small belly did not seem to be bloated at all. As for the 2 sausages, including the packaging bags, they were completely gone. At the school gate, Nian ran into Gwen, who had just arrived at the school. They were both stunned when they saw each other. "Gwen, is your cold better?" Nian was about to greet him. As a result, Gwen suddenly puffed up her cheeks, pretending not to see him, and quickened her pace to walk into the school. Nian was confused. What's going on? The girl's mind is really hard to understand. Nian shook his head, confused, and simply stopped thinking about it. However, he still had to chase her. Nian quickened his pace to catch up. However, the faster he chased, the faster Gwen ran in front. The 2 ran into the teaching building one after the other. At that moment, a girl called out to Nian in the hallway, "Senior, please stop for a moment." Nian looked up and saw a female student, about 15 years old. Her long blonde hair was tied into a cheesy ponytail, with many strands tangled and haphazardly draped across her forehead and face. She wore a pair of thick black glasses with frames, and her constant look down, afraid to look directly at people, made her look like a homebody, a nobody in school, or perhaps the perfect target for bullying and ridicule from her peers. Nian had no particular impression of this female classmate, but out of politeness, he still asked gently, "Excuse me, classmate, what can I do for you?" The girl hesitated, bit her lip, and then mustered up the courage to say, "Senior, my name is Kara Danvers. We met at the opening party." "I remember now," Nian said, suddenly realizing that she had been alone in a deserted corner outside the crowd during the opening party. Perhaps reminiscing about his childhood encounter with Gwen, Nian couldn't help but approach her and explain some of the school's policies and rules. However, that had been almost half a year ago. "You still remember me?" The girl's eyes suddenly lit up, and she raised her head slightly, gazing intently at Nian. She had been hesitant, but now she seemed to have finally made up her mind. Perhaps it was her overly sharp spider sense, or perhaps it was her female sixth sense, but Gwen, who had stopped in the hallway, saw this scene and suddenly felt a sense of foreboding. She wanted to step forward and interrupt Kara's next words. But as if anticipating Gwen's interruption, Kara secretly clenched her fists, her voice accelerating as if in a burst of energy. "Senior, I like you. Please go out with me." Her voice wasn't loud, but not too quiet, audible throughout the entire corridor. Nian's mouth dropped open. "What?" Gwen's beautiful eyes narrowed sharply. A few seconds later, and the students in the corridor erupted in an uproar. "Youth is wonderful," a passing teacher commented, turning a blind eye and shaking their head. Ring, ring, ring. The bell rang. The vast high school campus was filled with a commotion as a large number of students filed out of the teaching building. Aside from some conversation classes and lunch, most were discussing the silver-haired goddess and the campus confession incident that morning. Childhood sweethearts versus a girl who appeared from nowhere? The most popular person versus the most popular person? This is definitely going to be in the school's weekly news. Fortunately, after today, there's a week-long holiday. Nian, the protagonist of this incident, packed up his things and left the school gate early. Behind him, Gwen, carrying her school bag in one hand and tapping her boots, hurried after him. Her earlier embarrassment had completely forgotten. Gwen angrily demanded, Nian, you're not really going to agree to a girl's confession the first time you met her, are you? It wasn't the first time we met, Nian corrected. It was the second time we met. The second time? That's too much? Gwen frantically said. Don't worry, I didn't agree to her. But you didn't refuse either. That's because... Nian paused, looking at Gwen seriously. You know what? Confessing in public shows she took a lot of courage. I haven't figured out how to respond to her courage and determination yet. Nian said apologetically, I'm sorry, Gwen, I accidentally dragged you into this. This had nothing to do with you. Gwen stared blankly at Nian's back as he continued walking forward, her soft, rosy lower lip now tightly clenched by her teeth. No, it doesn't matter, Gwen thought to herself. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22, The Yuan Devouring Nian appears online. The sun was about to set over the city, and with the dusk, a light snow began to fall again. Nian was returning home. Passing the park, he took a moment to glance at the lawn. The kitten that had been there that morning had disappeared. Good luck, poor little thing, in this cold winter. Nian sighed, touched the sausage in his pocket, and walked away, wrapped in his jacket. But when Nian returned to his apartment building and looked at the open elevator door, a bold line appeared above his head. Why are you here? A black question mark filled Nian's face. Inside the residence elevator, a small orange kitten was curled up in a corner, having been there for who knows how long. When Nian appeared at the elevator entrance, the kitten yawned, as if aware of something, rubbing its sleepy eyes with its paws, its expression harmless. Nian was a little dumbfounded. How did this cat know he lived here? No, this was probably just a coincidence. Nian pretended not to notice it, walked into the elevator, and pressed the button for his floor. Meanwhile, several residents entered the elevator, and to prevent the kitten from being stepped on, Nian chose to stand in front of it. The elevator began to ascend, people coming and going. Nian stole a glance at the kitten lying on the floor behind him. Well behaved, not making any noise. Until they reached the 16th floor, where Nian lived. Nian hadn't moved yet. The little orange cat, already awake, squatting in the corner, suddenly stood up, took a step, and slipped through the gap between his feet, exiting the elevator. No way. Nian's mouth twitched slightly. He stepped out of the elevator and looked at the kitten squatting quietly at his doorstep. What's going on with this cat? Back. Inside, Diana was also stunned when she saw Nian entering with the kitten. She asked curiously, Did you pick it up? Auntie, I want to ask you something first. Could it be that you picked it up? Nian asked weakly. No, Diana shook her head flatly. In all these years, I've only picked you up once, and I haven't picked up anyone else. That's true, Nian scratched his head, looking at the familiar little orange cat that had entered their home. He hesitated. Auntie, can we adopt it? Now that they were already here, and it was winter outside, he couldn't bear to kick it out again. I have no objection, Diana nodded. But you have to be prepared to take care of it in the future. Of course. In fact, I've wanted to have a cat for a long time. Nian smiled, picked up the little orange cat, and said without hesitation, Then, from now on, you'll be called Little Emperor. The little orange cat blinked, completely confused by the perfunctory nature of the name. Aunt Diana, with her wifely air, smiled and urged, Go take a shower first. We'll have dinner later. Okay. Let's take a shower together, Little Emperor. Nian thought better of it and simply carried the little orange cat into the bathtub, filling it with warm water. The little orange cat, unusually unafraid of the water, lay idly on the edge of the tub, letting Nian, naked, rub shower gel into its pale orange fur. Soon, its body was covered in white foam. He finished washing the cat's belly. Nian turned the little orange cat over, rubbing the soft, white fur on its underbelly. He couldn't help but mutter, "Little Emperor, so you're a female." Meow. The kitten, whose eyes had been narrowed, suddenly became angry and bit Nian's finger violently. Its slightly sharp fangs pierced its skin, and a drop of blood fell onto the bathroom floor. "Little Emperor." Nian cried out in pain and quickly withdrew his finger. As if realizing he had done something wrong, the little orange cat looked at Nian's bleeding finger with a humane expression of grievance. "Okay, it's not your fault. Be more careful next time and don't bite people carelessly," Nian said soothingly and admonishingly. Looking at his hand, which was bleeding and stained with cat saliva, he was about to clean it with clean water when his body suddenly trembled. "Wait, what is this feeling?" Nian's eyes widened in shock, a familiar yet strange feeling washing over him. His ordinary human brown pupils suddenly shifted to a cold, vertical glow. The master of the familiar, activated. Nian. Hearing Nian's cry from within the bathroom, Diana quickly flung the door open. Almost the instant the door swung open, a hideous, barbed tentacle, like a spear, barreled toward her face. Diana quickly dodged, following the tentacle's path into the bathroom. She could see Nian, naked, standing in the bathtub. From behind him, several hideous, violent, twisting and elongating tentacles sprouted, their edges studded with sharp, barbed teeth. In the corner of the bathroom, a kitten crouched on the ground, its eyes lighting up as it gazed at Nian, now sprouting a monstrous, terrifying tentacle. What the hell is going on? Diana wondered. I'm not really sure. Little Emperor bit me, and that's what happened to my body. Nian smiled wryly, looking at the tentacle trembling and twisting wildly from his back. Did the blood and saliva act as the liquid medium to trigger the master's ability? Diana glanced at the blood on the floor and the little orange cat, still incredulous. A cat? How could that happen? Swoosh. The tentacle suddenly instinctively returned, biting Diana's back like a bloody maw. Diana was startled, feeling the terrifying suction of a small black hole erupt behind her. She struggled hard, freeing herself from the tentacle's pull, but her clothes shredded in an instant, revealing a body as perfect as a piece of exquisitely carved jade. There was more than one tentacle. 7 or 8 more were twisting and twitching wildly, devouring the towel, shower gel, mirror, and even the bathtub water at a visible speed. In less than half a second, everything in the bathroom was emptied. The little orange cat dove into Nian's arms just in time, escaping. One of the tentacles wrapped around Diana's slender, supple waist, and Nian could clearly feel the exquisite touch from the tip of his tongue. Wait, why the tip of the tongue? He held the tentacle firmly in place with one hand, lest it be swallowed by the black hole within. Diana didn't dare pull hard, lest she injure Nian. After a moment's thought, she quickly concluded, if this was the cat's ability, then it should be yours now. Nian, try to control it. I'm trying. Nian gritted his teeth and closed his eyes. In the darkness, the sensations of the tentacle were even more real and exquisite. Soon, the tentacle extending from his back gradually subsided, and the one wrapped around Diana's waist slowly loosened. Chapter 23, The Yuan Devouring Beast, The Farce of the Truth. At the dining table, oblivious to the disaster it had caused, the little orange cat happily devoured its share of meat, behaving like any other kitten. Nian sat in a chair nearby, shirtless and wearing only pants. Diana, dressed in a new set of house clothes, stood behind him and softly asked, "How are you feeling now?" "I feel like I want to eat it all," Nian said, facing the food on the table in front of him. "Then eat it," Diana said, taking a few steps back. Nian took a deep breath, and then, the skin on his back suddenly split open, like a hideous, bloody maw. 8 tentacles twisted and grew. They swarmed over the table in front of them, devouring not only the food but also the plates, forks, and tablecloths. All in a second. Nian retracted his tentacles, acting like a normal person again, his pupils gleaming with a soul-devouring, cold blue light. "How is it?" Diana continued, her slender white fingers tracing across Nian's back. "I don't feel anything." Nian touched his stomach. All the things that the tentacles swallowed just now were not eaten. "Then that should be right." Diana nodded and looked at the little orange cat who was eating happily, It's a yuan-devouring beast. Yuan-devouring beast. Xinian blinked. That's right. It's a species from outer space. My mother mentioned it before, but I don't know much about it. I only know that the element devourer looks like a cat on Earth, but possesses a terrifying ability. It can devour vast quantities of things into its own unique dimension. This species is very dangerous. Diana squinted, pondering. I don't know why this alien species would appear on Earth. Really? I don't think the little emperor is as dangerous as I imagined. Xinian recalled. If it were truly dangerous, it would have used its element devourer ability to devour me the first time we met it by the park. Besides, just now in the bathroom, it just bit me like a normal cat, without using its element devourer ability either. Diana said, do you want to keep it? Xinian looked at the little orange cat on the ground. Since it's an alien species, wouldn't it be even more dangerous to keep it outside? If it stays with us, we can at least stop it and teach it a lesson. That's true, Diana agreed. She also thought of something else. If the devourer truly harbored feelings for Nian, perhaps even a dependence on him, then he could provide her with close protection, or even act as a catalyst for her abilities. So, what are you going to do tonight? Can you fully control your tentacles? Diana asked. Probably not. Nian spread his hands. Whenever I get close to something, the tentacles instinctively want to devour it, just like breathing. This devourer instinct isn't so easy to control. Just like when he previously acquired his aunt's demigod powers. These powers and abilities weren't innate, but rather a sudden acquisition, so they couldn't be turned on and off at will. I don't know if 4 hours will be enough, Nian said, unsure. This time, it wasn't the indirect triggering of his abilities as before, but a direct exchange of fluids with a devourer. If it continued all night, he'd forget about sleep, lying in bed, and the next second, he'd be swallowed by it, banished to an unknown dimension. Who could withstand that? I have a plan, Diana suddenly said. Next to Xinian's room, the room was filled with a unique scent of violet. Xinian lay on an ice blue duvet, his upper body still naked, but faintly shimmering with a hazy golden light. The golden lasso bound Xinian's body, including his arms, and wrapped around his entire upper body in circles. Diana, wearing a suspender nightgown, leaned against the bed next to him, flipping through an archaeology book under the dim light of the bedside lamp. I say, Aunt. Is this the way you mean to deal with it? Xinian, unable to move, was momentarily overwhelmed. Xinian was speechless. Go to sleep quickly. Diana said. Okay. Xinian closed his eyes. It's been a long time since I slept with my aunt. So cozy, no way. In the dim and warm light, my aunt was only wearing a thin suspender nightgown, her graceful and moving curves were clearly visible, and her 2 slender white legs were crossed together. Who can sleep like this? What's wrong? Diana was still flipping through the pages. Nothing. Nian was about to make an excuse, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he changed his words, and, you are so beautiful, In an instant, the air in the room suddenly became quiet. Diana's hands stopped flipping through the book, and her stunning face froze slightly. Nian's mind was blank. He was dumbfounded. Dumbfounded. What had he just said? Exclamation mark. You. Diana's face flushed slightly, and she said, don't mind. It's the lasso of truth that's binding you. Anyone who is bound by it will reveal their truth when questioned. Oh, really? Nian laughed, and wanted to crawl under the bed. Don't mind? Of course he wouldn't mind. How was your school today? Diana deliberately changed the subject. Bound by the lasso of truth, Xinian said bluntly, it's nothing. Gwen got angry for some reason. Also, a girl from the lower grade, Kara, confessed her love to me in public. A subtle silence fell over the room. Diana, lost in thought, remained silent for a moment before softly asking, so, do you like that girl? Xinian continued unhesitatingly, I've only met her twice, so I can't say I like her or dislike her. However, I have a good impression of her. You're certainly at the age to fall in love. Diana closed her archaeology book and smiled faintly. If you think a girl is good, take the initiative and seize the opportunity. Xinian suddenly said, I think my aunt is quite good. Diana shuddered slightly. She put down her archaeology book, reached out to turn off the bedside lamp, and said calmly in the darkness, go to bed early. Xinian remained silent. Was that last sentence a forced utterance under the power of the lasso of truth? Was it something that could only be said after ignoring their relationship? He didn't know. Nian only knew that was what he wanted to convey most at this moment. Chapter 24. I want to take you to New York. It was 7:30 in the morning. Nian stood before the mirror, watching his pupils transform from cat-like vertical pupils back to normal human brown. He tried to pick up a new bar of soap, but the tentacles didn't devour him like they had last night. The devourer's ability had finally disappeared. He breathed a sigh of relief, but this incident also gave him a deeper understanding of his own ability, the master of the familiar. 12 hours. By exchanging fluids with a member of the opposite sex, Nian would be able to retain their ability for half a day. Compared to the previous 4 hours, the duration was 3 times greater. Beside him, the sleepy devourer cub, Xiao Wang, looked at Nian in the mirror with a strange expression. In his unique senses, Nian, who had become a fellow creature, had changed back again, and he couldn't help but feel disappointed. If he took another bite, would he be able to return to his own kind? Xiao Wang was eager to try. As if he could see its intention, Nian sternly warned, "Little Emperor, don't bite me again. Otherwise, I'll punish you with not eating for a day." Meow. Little Emperor, who resembled a small orange cat, immediately drooped his ears and wagged his tail, looking listless. His aunt had gone out. Bored yet somewhat pleased, Nian half sat on the sofa in the living room. So much had happened in the past few days, and he preferred this relaxed, normal life of an ordinary person. Whoever wanted to save the world could do it. He wasn't a superhero anyway. After lying there for a while, Nian simply picked up his phone and started checking Facebook. He didn't realize it until he checked. He was completely stunned. He'd thought the discussion and topic would die down after a day or two. Unexpectedly, the online heat over the Washington, D.C. war zone incident had escalated over the past 2 days, with widespread targeted news coverage, reaching a staggering level of national discussion. Many people even took screenshots of his live video of him fighting in women's clothing, mostly from behind, and transformed them into various profile pictures, cover photos, or memes. Nian held his breath, watching for a long moment before uttering, "Oh my God." His only real hope was that he hadn't revealed his true identity that night. He'd seen the videos circulating online and in news reports, but they were either blurry from too far away or only showed his back. No one knew that the new superhero, the Silver Goddess, who slew the monster abomination, was actually an ordinary male Chinese middle school student. The only people who knew the truth were Aunt Diana, Spider-Woman, and the now-deceased abomination. However, seeing his photos of himself in women's clothing flooding every corner of the internet, Nian nearly dug a hole in the sofa with his toes. What was a massive social demise? This was it. Nian quickly opened Twitter, his go-to online communication platform. His last hope was completely shattered when he saw the almost identical posts from his classmates, like "I want to be the Silver Goddess's sword and announce I'm a Silver Goddess fan." And what was the classmates' "I want to be stepped on by her"? Well, a male teacher in the guidance class had quietly replaced a photo of Nian in women's clothing with his Twitter profile picture, a subtle sign of admiration. Nian's mouth twitched. "It's hopeless. This world is hopeless. I'm starting to think about destroying the world, or maybe just moving to another planet." Nian's face was filled with despair. Suddenly, a private message came through on Twitter. Nian slumped down on the sofa, weakly flipping through the pages. "Gwen, what are you doing?" "Nian, I'm shutting myself in." "Gwen." She quickly sent a second message, "Okay, I'm not mad at you anymore." Nian was speechless for a moment. He still didn't know why she'd been so angry that morning. "Gwen, but you have to promise me one thing." "Nian, what is it?" "Go to New York with me." "New York?" Nian was stunned. Washington, D.C., and New York aren't very far apart, only about 300 or 400 kilometers as the crow flies. With convenient transportation like trains and buses, the trip could be made in 3 hours at the fastest. But they were in different cities after all. Even if we were shopping, we couldn't possibly go that far, right? "Nian, going shopping?" "Gwen, of course not. Have you forgotten? At the end of this semester, in January of next year, our class will be organizing a group trip. Our instructor has already chosen New York as the destination, and as the class monitor, I'd like to take advantage of this holiday to go there and plan the route and stuff." Afraid Nian would refuse, Gwen quickly added, "You know, it's not very safe for a girl to go out alone." "Okay," Nian agreed. Gwen, then today. Let's meet at the train station at 10 o'clock. The sooner we go, the sooner we can return. Today. Nian frowned. He had thought Gwen would go after Christmas, but she hadn't expected it to be before Christmas. But that made sense. Christmas Day and the days following it were family gatherings, so it wouldn't be easy to travel far. Thinking of this, Nian was about to get up from the sofa and make some travel preparations when another private message arrived on Twitter. This time, it wasn't from Gwen. Kara, Senior, good morning. It was Kara Danvers, the new schoolmate from yesterday. Good morning, Nian replied. Sorry, I forgot to reply yesterday. I've thought it over carefully. You're a very nice girl, but I have absolutely no experience in dating or relationships, so I can't agree to your confession. Ding, the nice guy card has been issued. Nian breathed a sigh of relief, but before he could put his phone down, another message came through. Then let's try going on a date. A date? Nian didn't react. Before he could reply, Kara's Twitter message continued, how's it going today? At the train station. Nian was feeling overwhelmed. In front of him, two girls stood facing each other. Naturally, they were Gwen and Kara. Gwen was wearing her usual beige jeans, black-soled thigh-high boots, and a fitted hooded jacket. Her short, brilliant blonde hair gave her a sophisticated look with a rare coolness. To use the common phrase used by students at school, she was a slick queen. As for Kara, at first glance, Nian and Gwen barely recognized her. Today, Kara wasn't wearing her usual black-framed glasses, nor was she wearing her hair in a bun. Her dark, slightly curly blonde hair fell over her shoulders and lower back. When she raised her head slightly, her youthful, sweet features were revealed. She wore a pair of white canvas shoes. Although she was wearing a simple jacket and trousers, without much extra attire, her natural beauty still revealed a youthful, beautiful, and sweet girl. The two strikingly different beauties standing together immediately caught the attention of many passengers at the station. However, upon seeing the young man standing between them, the entire crowd quickly erupted in a collective, indignant expression. What a sin. Chapter 25, Girls Who Are Not Ordinary People. The train slowly pulled out of the station, heading towards New York. Gwen and Kara, sitting across from each other, stared at each other with a hint of unspoken hostility. Nian, sitting between them, was completely oblivious. He rested his backpack on his knees, unzipped it slightly, and a small orange head peeked out. Kitten. Gwen couldn't help but wonder, Nian, when did you get a kitten? An orange one at that. His name is Wang. I found him in the park yesterday. My aunt went out, and I thought it would be a good idea to keep him with me. Nian gently massaged the kitten's soft chin with the flat of his thumb, and Wang's expression of pleasure was palpable. I've wanted to adopt a kitten before. Gwen's beautiful eyes sparkled, filled with curiosity. After all, who can resist cuteness? Kara, standing next to him, on the other hand, had a strange look in her sapphire blue eyes from the moment she laid eyes on Wang. Let me hold you, Gwen said, reaching out towards the little orange cat. But before her hand could touch Wang's body, the cat's fur suddenly stood up and it quickly retreated into Nian's school bag. Through the darkness visible through the zipper, a pair of eerie, vertical pupilled, animal eyes glowed with a faint green light. Gwen shuddered, her hand instinctively withdrawing, and the tiny hairs on her body also stood up like a beast's instinct. Clearly, both human and animal were startled. As an ordinary person, Nian naturally didn't notice Gwen's abnormality. What are you afraid of? She's my friend, Nian said as he lectured Wang, smiling at Gwen. Don't worry, Gwen. This little guy is very defensive. Now, he won't even let me touch his aunt. It's okay, I'm fine. Gwen shook her head, her eyes still fixed on Nian's school bag, a deep fear and surprise welling up in her eyes. My spider senses were clearly there. At that moment, I had the illusion that I was about to be eaten. Was it really an illusion? Okay, I'll take Wang to the train restroom for some water. He gets thirsty and gets a bit impatient. Nian left his seat with his school bag. Watching Nian's back as he entered the train restroom, Gwen's attention immediately shifted from the little orange cat to the quiet junior sitting beside her. Tell me, what exactly is your goal? Senior, what is your goal? Bright sunlight streamed through the train window, and Kara's once dark blonde hair took on a platinum sheen. The youthful beauty asked curiously, wanting to date Senior Nian? Can that be considered a goal? Shameless. Gwen's cheeks flushed slightly, a flash of shame and anger passing through her. Then, lowering her voice, she said, "You can fool others, but you can't fool me. You clearly." Senior Gwen, Kara narrowed her eyes slightly and said bluntly, "You're not an ordinary person, are you?" "So what?" Since she had laid her cards on the table, Gwen readily admitted it. At school, the moment Gwen laid eyes on Kara, she felt an unprecedented sense of crisis. This sense of crisis wasn't born from a so-called rival mentality, but something deeper. It trembled her body and soul even more than facing a massive and powerful abomination. "Whatever your motives, you can come at me privately. Nian is just an ordinary person." Gwen quietly clenched her fists and faced Kara, ready to fight at any moment. Kara simply stroked her hair and said seriously, "Senior, my views on choosing a partner are very normal, and I personally have no interest in you. As for Senior Nian, since you, who are not ordinary people, can be friends with him, why can't I be his future partner?" Seemed reasonable? Gwen raised an eyebrow slightly, sensing that Kara was not a good person, but she seemed to have no intention of harming Nian. Recalling what had just happened, Gwen asked, "What do you think of that cat?" "That wasn't an ordinary cat," Kara said seriously. "No, it just had a cat-like appearance. In reality, neither its inner qualities nor its species are related to Earth's cats." Kara propped up one cheek and pondered, "This is the first time I've seen a creature like this either. The structure of its bones and internal organs is truly unusual, like a small, mobile black hole. Huh? Isn't it dangerous for Nian to be alone with it?" Gwen stood up immediately, looking worriedly towards the silent train restroom. "Don't worry, Senior," Kara blinked, speaking to a metal shelter in the restroom. "I've been watching it since a while ago. The creature was very well behaved with you, Senior, just like any other kitten. You can see through things." Gwen looked back at Kara in surprise, remembering her earlier analysis of the kitten. If she couldn't see through things, how could she possibly know what was going on inside a kitten? She was no ordinary person, so this must have been how she'd figured it out. Of course, Kara nodded matter-of-factly, gesturing toward the restroom. "Look, Senior Nian is in there right now. Close your eyes. Stop looking." Gwen's face flushed, and she shielded Kara's eyes with her hands, preventing her from peering toward the restroom. Kara instinctively raised her hand, gently pushing Gwen away from her. With a thud, Gwen slammed hard against the back of the seat opposite, a look of shock on her face. Where did those slender, fair arms get such formidable strength? Kara panicked again, apologizing hastily, "I'm sorry, Senior, I didn't control my strength. I can only say. Fortunately, it hit me." Gwen exhaled, brushed the dust off her clothes, and stood up again without a care in the world. A moment later, Nian returned to her seat, carrying the little orange cat in her backpack, and looked at Gwen and Kara in amazement as they played around. It seemed these two beautiful girls got along even better than expected. Seeing Nian return, Gwen and Kara quickly returned to normal. They sat calmly in their seats, as if nothing had happened, returning to their respective selves as the cool, arrogant queen and the girl next door. Nian was completely bewildered. Wait, why was there a dent in the back of the chair in front of him? Regardless, the train continued its steady pace, drawing ever closer to its destination, New York. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.